Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show that, despite the word chaos being in the name, is much more orderly and much more in tow with everything compared to what Twitter has been over the last week and a half or two in terms of social media in general. Ironic because we are having this show on Twitter, so let's hope that we haven't already been kicked off in the first 20 seconds of it. But irregardless of that, and that aside, welcome back to everyone's favorite weekend spectacle, which at least 1 week the season will actually have to be during the week, but future discussions, ladies and gentlemen, future discussions, off-air discussions. Welcome back to the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, your favorite NFL podcast that loves talking fun, or loves having fun, loves talking football, and loves causing just a little bit and sometimes a lot of chaos. As always, welcoming you into the show, myself, Iceman Jerick, who loves taking shots whenever I can in the beginning intros because it grows the heart a little bit. It just does, and not in an unhealthy way. Although I probably should get a doctor checkup at some point, but that's on my own time. And joining me this week, a good man, a man who joined us via video last time, ladies and gentlemen, Podfather himself, Rick. Rick, how are we doing?
Hello, Lord Elon, and all you Twitter heads out there. Pleasure being back on your streaming service again. Yeah, I'm good. I'm joining you back from the void in New York, so we'll see how the internet holds up. I mean, we did have a theory about potentially me doing this from a hotel every single Saturday. That way I get the good Wi-Fi, but so far so good. And yeah, it's nice to be home. Nice to be doing this with that lovely seashell in the background. I'm eager to talk some football as well.
It looks good for sure, and I will say so far the Wi-Fi is holding up, Rick. So maybe the colder it eventually gets outside, maybe the better it'll be for your service.
I'm also thinking the fact that it's actually sunny outside, and it's actually not that cold. It's actually like 70 degrees outside right now because it's a little humid. So I'm thinking that the better the weather is, the better the Wi-Fi will be. I was contemplating doing this outside again, but I thought let's not chance it because it was too windy. Let's not chance it.
The more global warming there is, the better your Wi-Fi goes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Are we willing to sacrifice the planet so the show can go smoother? Probably.
Well, Rain Wilson changed his name to like Rainfall High Climate Rates Wilson or whatever it is. So maybe we'll have to do that at some point too.
For sure. Now, ladies and gentlemen, of course, as you guys can see, there's only two of us on the show today, so we know what you're all thinking. One of the key cogs to the show is obviously missing. Rick, where's Sandoval?
Well, so Sandoval is actually about to crash the spot where Justin currently is right now. I sent him in a little box to Justin's brother's wedding, and yeah, I mean we'll see what happens. They'll probably show up as like a late addition to the band or to the DJ or whatever. But yeah, it should be kind of fun to see what happens there.
That's going to be awesome, and it's going to cause Justin a hell of a time to say that.
Oh, it's going to ruin Justin's night, and I'm going to love every second of it.
But yes, like Rick said, there, Justin not with us this week, ladies and gentlemen, because he is at his brother's wedding. So happy wedding to Justin's brother. I'm sure he's watched the show at least once. So
marriage is a beautiful thing.
Exactly,
it really is.
Yes, Rick is a married man, and he can give all the advice in the world. And one day, ladies and gentlemen, Justin too will be married. Will we be invited is the question, Rick. Are we going to get invited to that, you think?
Well, I mean, as you know, I'm currently now an ordained minister with the Universal Church of Life, so I'll probably be the one administering the ceremony there. You'll definitely be there in some capacity, but Sandoval probably will not get an invite. It'll get lost in the mail.
Well, I mean, everyone gets a +1, Rick. Just saying.
That is true.
We have our ways.
That is true. We do have our ways.
We have our ways, of course. But, wedding and holy matrimony and all that good stuff aside, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to bring you another episode, and the chaos just keeps on coming. We don't – the best thing about especially our name, Rick, is that when we came up with this, in part, we were going to stir up a little bit of stuff when it came to doing the show, whether it be our own takes, our own opinions, such as for 1 week in this season, we would have taken Cole Kmet over Devontae Adams, or other things such as our 3-round mock, which honestly, hindsight 2020, even though we probably, we did probably overdraft some guys compared to where they went in the draft, we had a couple gems that are actually performing well in some NFL teams. So this podcast knows a little bit about what it's talking about, ladies and gentlemen. But we don't need to manufacture the chaos. The NFL just gives us the chaos in regards to a firing and a hiring this week. So we got plenty to talk about, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, Frank Reich was fired from the Indianapolis Colts, and they put in a new man to lead the charge for the rest of the season. We'll get to that in a couple of moments, which will then lead to more conversation. We're halfway through the season. 9 weeks are down, 9 more to go, not including the playoffs, obviously. And as we know, it is tradition that the day after the last games of the NFL season are played, it is actually pretty common for a slew of coaches or at least assistant coaches, to get fired. Now, we're not going to put assistant coaches on this because, there's way too many in different teams. There's 32 teams. There are more than one assistant coach per team, but there are 32 head coaches. So we are going to have a broad discussion with a little hot seat meter in terms of 1 to 5. And, well, we're going to do that. Justin probably wasn't able to rank any 1 to 5 thing, but we are going to give you guys head coaches that we think collectively as a unit we decided should be on the hot seat right now. How safe are they? What can they do to save their job? Or is it just over for them? Is their goose cooked, as some would say? And of course, we have the pick challenge. We have an extra special way that we're handling that this week. And of course, we finish it off with the Rant podium. And it's special for me. I'm a house of one in person watching this, not aside from the viewers on Twitter and YouTube right now. So this is the best thing for me. So yeah. we have a lot to talk about today. We're not going to waste any time. Like I said earlier, Frank Reich fired from the Indianapolis Colts after 4 full seasons and halfway through year 5 for him. It's been a rough go of things to say the very least for him and Indy. A lot to unpack there, and we will unpack that in a moment. But of course, before we do that, it's kind of tradition here. We got to, whenever someone is not on the show, I like to make sure that they're still involved. So kicking us off on this, Rick, is going to be our favorite, our usual games master, who sadly we don't have games this week. But Justin, tell us about Indy.
Going on. Sorry I couldn't be there this week, unfortunately. But I'm still here, still excited to talk some football. The first thing we're going on about is the Frank Reich firing. And I think it's been a long time coming at this point. It's pretty interesting, actually, thinking about how close they really were from being a really competitive football team. They were a couple quarterback trades away from really being one of those top contenders, especially in recent years where we've seen all of these top quarterbacks switch teams and really make a difference. So, it's interesting to see. Obviously, there's been some missteps. The Matt Ryan trade obviously hasn't worked out. The Carson Wentz trade hasn't really worked out. And for a team now that is supposedly having the top young running back in the league, a really good offensive line, and a really, really solid defense, now all of a sudden they start out with a losing record, and in his 5th year, Frank Reich gets fired. So I think it was the right move. I'm very curious to see the success of Jeff Saturday, if there is any. I believe it's the first coach since the mid-50s to ever be hired to be a head coach and have 0 collegiate or professional NFL coaching experience. So it's either going to work out really, really well for them, they're going to look like geniuses, or it's going to be what you think it's going to be, and they'll be looking for another coach next year. So we'll see. Good luck. They do play the Raiders this week, which is interesting because that's another team that doesn't seem like they want to win any football games. And yeah, good luck to the Colts.
Yeah, the Raiders don't want to win games, especially when you're picking them, Jerg, as we said last week. Yeah.
Apparently, I have been the key to the downfall of the Raiders this season.
I'm the kiss of death for everybody, so let's be honest here, But
very true. Very true. But let's get to it. Like Justin said, Frank Reich fired. And there are a lot of different ways to unpack this, Rick. Simplest way to do so, Frank Reich's tenure in Indy really was the definition of going up and down. First year, it started out really well in 2018. 10-6 record, second in the AFC South. They end up losing to the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC divisional playoffs. I believe it was the Houston Texans that they defeated in the wild card round that year, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So it looked like a good first year. 2018 was also the year of Andrew Luck. So Frank Reich, new head coach, had a finally healthy, once again, Andrew Luck. And the offense was looking pretty good as well. So it looked like things were all right in the world. But did disaster strike? Because, of course, we all remember the fateful time in the 2019 preseason where Andrew Luck decided to retire, that his body and his mind just could not deal with it anymore in terms of having to rehab after injury, which I remember late into that preseason. I actually forgot that he was even injured or trying to rehab something. So it was a shock retirement, at least. They end up going 7-9 that season, missing the playoffs. Strong bounce back the next year with Phillip Rivers at the helm. In 2020, they go 11-5, second in the AFC South again, losing to the Buffalo Bills in the AFC wildcard game. That game very notable because Jonathan Taylor had a pretty good game for a rookie. Naeem Hines also made an effect, and they were literally one throw away. They were one throw away, or one big run if they had done something like that, but one throw away from actually dethroning a Buffalo Bills team that made the AFC Championship game in that postseason. So they were very competitive there. Last season, they go 9-8 with some regression. Carson Wentz played good and bad, low interception numbers, but never really made the big plays that we remember. And of course, it all culminated in the season finale last year, where they just dropped the ball, is a kind way of actually kind of putting it, against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Duval. And then, of course, this year to this point, 3-5-1, looking rough, tied with Houston early in the season, or at the beginning of the season, lost to Jacksonville again and got absolutely embarrassed by them. I know that specifically because I remember I definitely picked that game. I think I picked them in two of the first 2 weeks, or the first 2 weeks, whatever it was, however the schedule worked out. And it was bad. It was
didn't
bad.
work out. Did not work out. Yeah.
Yeah. So ultimately, and even after firing the offensive coordinator and letting him go, they put up a stinker against the New England Patriots, and it all culminated in finally, earlier this week, Frank Reich was let go. He was given the pink slip. He was kicked out. So that's how the Frank Reich tenure starts and ends. Rick, your thoughts about, not even getting into who they've hired as the interim yet, just about Frank Reich, his tenure in Indy, and just how it unceremoniously has come to an end.
Well, I think the thing with the Colts for me is that as unfortunate as the retirement of Andrew Luck was, obviously he needed to retire for his personal health and everything. And I've heard he's going back to Stanford for a master's degree, which is just excellent because he's a very smart guy. The Colts have been looking for, since 2019, they've been looking for their next Andrew Luck, basically. They've been looking for somebody. You know that they've had, in Frank Reich's tenure, they had 6 quarterbacks start in 5 years. It was Luck, then Brissett, then obviously Rivers, Wentz, Ryan, and now Sam Ehlinger. So there's been no consistency on that offensive side. And that's kind of been the big thing, is that at the very least, when Frank Reich was the offensive coordinator for the Eagles, he had a system in place with Carson Wentz to the point where Nick Foles, when he finally went on to win the Super Bowl after Wentz got hurt, knew what to do with the offense in that regard. Frank Reich's not a bad coaching mind. He's really not. This season was just, and we've seen it. It's been so unpredictable this season, and it's been so chaotic, tagline for the show, that it's just been, somebody had to get the axe. And I mean, the Colts were underperforming. They were underwhelming. This was a team that we expected to be a lot better than they currently are. And I think, that's an indication of either injuries or just a team that's not firing on all cylinders at the moment. I mean, again, look at everybody that's gone on the IR or that has gone into some form of an injury. I know Shaquille Leonard's kind of been hit, kind of an up or down, hit or miss. Michael Pittman hasn't really been the guy that we expected him to be. Jonathan Taylor hasn't dominated. And biggest of all, they lost Rigoberto Sanchez, so they've had to go with a new punter. So obviously, when you do that, you lose. It's rough because the Colts, I think, expected more, especially in a division that I think they could have said was winnable, with an aging Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee, with Jacksonville not really being there yet, and with Houston being a joke in a sense. So I get the idea that Jim Irsay wanted to pull this trigger right away. And again, I mean, I think Frank Reich will find his way back to a coaching spot in some capacity. He's a very good offensive mind. He's got a Super Bowl under his belt. He's been an O coordinator in a lot of different places. He's not a bad person. I think this is more situational than anything else. It was a bad fit. It was just, you're right. When you think Indy, you think consistency, and they just were not consistent this season or even in his tenure. Like you said, they had some winning seasons. Even last year, last year they were 9-8. That's still a winning season. Yeah, you lost the big game at the end, but, you still had a winning mark. And if they won that game, who knows what could have happened in the playoffs. They might have been, very fortunate to get through, but, it is what it is. Sometimes it just breaks down on you. And so he's an unfortunate casualty of that. But I think, I think he's going to be fine. And I don't really know if it jolts the Colts into relevancy again, but it does give them a sense of clearing out the inconsistency of we don't have a starting quarterback for more than one season, or in Matt Ryan's case, half a season.
Right. I'm with you in regards to, here at the very end of his tenure, just rough going, especially offensively. My mindset is always, when it comes to these coaches that get hired, no matter how far into the tenure they get, when the thing that you were touted for starts to fall off, that's when questions about your job security start to come about. And for Frank Reich coming in as an offensive guy, like you mentioned, being the offensive coordinator for that Eagles team that ended up winning the Super Bowl, being hired as the head coach, the literally weeks, months after that. He came in with a lot of promise. It looked great with Andrew Luck, but like we said, that constant revolving carousel of quarterbacks coming in, and he made it work in a couple instances. I actually, looking back, Jacoby Brissett wasn't that bad in Indy, and we see now in Cleveland he is still a serviceable quarterback, not ideally a full, 17-game starter, but at the end of the day, he's still a pretty good quarterback. They made it work with Phillip Rivers, and then of course with Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, and Sam Ehlinger himself. A rough way to end, but I think the biggest thing was just the offense did not look good this season. Jonathan Taylor still has only had one rushing touchdown on the season. That was the week 1 against Houston. A guy who a lot of people had a lot of faith in terms of the damage that he could do, just has not gone the way that they envisioned. That offensive line has started to really fall off in terms of, not being what it was at one point, league-wide regarded as a top 3, top 4 offensive line in the NFL. Just completely fallen off this season in terms of that. And now you have ultimately that stinker of a game in New England, I think, sealed the fate of everything, especially with that really decision that we kind of I forget how much we really dove into the detail of it, but just benching Matt Ryan straight up. It was interesting to say the least what the mindset was behind that, and if he thought maybe he had a little bit more time than what he did, but clearly he didn't. So Frank Reich gone 40-33-1 record. You got to tie in there to finish his tenure in Indy, and 2 playoff appearances, 1 and 2 in the playoffs. Now, obviously, you fire a guy like that who still had some success, so this is going to be an interesting trial period, to say the least, on who the new head coach is. And you had a couple options. Rick, I'm going to, just for this part really quickly, I'm going to defer to you because you actually pointed out that there is some real head coaching experience on the Denver Broncos within the Broncos coaching staff. So before we get to who they did hire, do you want to mention some of the candidates that could have been up for it internally for Indy? I may have said Broncos there, but actually,
you confused your horses. That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, their defensive coordinator was Gus Bradley, and I know he hasn't had the greatest of history, but he did coach parts of 4 seasons with the Jaguars. I mean, he went 14-48, but he still has experience. And then their senior defensive assistant is John Fox, who coached Carolina and Denver and Chicago. He went to 2 Super Bowls. I mean, didn't win any of them, but he went to 2 Super Bowls. So that's another guy that you had on their staff that has some experience as a head coach. So there were names that were there. And I think in this case, you were expecting it to go with Gus Bradley because the old coordinator is Scott Milanovic, and he doesn't have that pedigree or experience as a head coach in the NFL. He was a Canadian Football League coach. He won the Grey Cup in 2012, which was the 100th Grey Cup with the Toronto Argonauts. But again, CFL and NFL are 2 totally different animals. So Gus Bradley, I think, would have been my number 1, and John Fox probably my number 2 if they had stayed in-house.
Yeah. And, they kind of did to an extent. Not on the coaching staff, but in the organization. Definitely, in an interesting situation that Indy was in when you fire your head coach, and who do you go with to have the rest of the season? You want to pick a guy, Rick, and it really depends on what the goal is in terms of the people making the decision. And obviously with Chris Ballard still maintaining his job there and Jim Irsay being the owner, the idea is still for this team to compete. As Jim Irsay made it very clear, the Colts are in the top 4 percentile, or whatever he said it was, at his press conference in terms of winning over the last 15, 20 years. This is an organization that has known winning for a very long time. That being said, though, like you mentioned, Gus Bradley may not have been the best coach, but again, steady hand. John Fox, if you just want to go the full veteran option, would have been there. A guy who's at least been to the 2 Super Bowls. But no, what they go with, and again, they technically stay in-house, but not in the way that we would have expected. The new Indianapolis interim head coach, I guess you could technically say, Jeff Saturday. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you heard that right. The former center, the great ESPN analyst, by the way. I'd love it when Saturdays on SportsCenter and on NFL Live and all that. And the high school head coach, apparently, Jeff Saturday, was hired to be the interim head coach for the remainder of this 2022 season for the Colts. I saw this, and Justin actually beat me to the punch by like seconds in the group chat of sharing it. Rick, what was your reaction? What was your reaction when you saw that piece of news?
I like Jeff Saturday. I think he's a great human being. He was a very good broadcaster and analyst, I think. He was an excellent player. Really was. One of the best centers, I think, of the 2000s, 2010s of that era. As Justin mentioned, this is the first time that someone's been hired without coaching experience. Actually, I looked it up. It's 1961. So here's a funny story about that. Norm Van Brocklin had just won the NFL championship with the Philadelphia Eagles in 1960. He was going to be the head coach of the Eagles in 61 after winning the title, and then they reneged on the deal to replace the retiring coach with him. So he went and coached the expansion Minnesota Vikings after that. He did not do very well. He was 29-51-4 in his tenure. So, look, we don't really know what to expect. We really don't, because you can't go from coaching a high school team to the NFL without some kind of questions or some kind of understanding. Now, there have been overtures made to him about, hey, come be our offensive line coach. Hey, come do this. Hey, come work with our team. Because it's Jeff Saturday. But this is playing with fire in a way. I mean, look, yes, could it work? Absolutely. But here's the other way it could go. And I won't go so far as to say what Joe Thomas said, which is the most egregious thing he's ever seen in the NFL. First of all, backtrack. Joe Thomas, this is the most egregious thing you've seen in the NFL. You played for Cleveland all your career. That's egregious enough in of itself. But this is why it'll backfire. When you bring in somebody who is a beloved member of your alumni system, when you bring in somebody who, is name recognition, is power, is brand, and they don't do well, it tarnishes the reputation of not only your franchise or organization, but that person as well. And the perfect example I have for this, when USC made the decision years ago to hire Lynn Swann as their athletic director, it didn't work. Lynn Swann was like the ultimate. Everyone at USC football know, oh my God, Lynn Swann, he played with the Steelers, he won Super Bowls, he's the Hall of Famer, he's a great guy. He wasn't fit to be an athletic director. Is Jeff Saturday fit to be a head coach? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see tomorrow. We'll see how this goes the rest of the way. It was a trendy hire. The Colts had to get on the back page in some way. Is it the right hire, considering who they had? I don't know, but I will say this. Jeff Saturday, as a center, has that cerebral mindset. This is why you say backup catchers might make the best managers in baseball. Look at Kevin Cash in Tampa. Look at Joe Girardi before the Philadelphia nonsense. And look at some of those other guys that are like utility players. Craig Counsell, Dave Roberts. The guys that are on the bench or the guys that are not the glory hounds are the most cerebral and the guys with the best minds for football. So I can see it. I don't know if it's going to be past 8 games, but I'm willing to – it's a train wreck, and I'm willing to stop and look at the train wreck and see how bad it's going to be. You know it's going to be bad, but you just have to stop and watch because you have to.
Yeah, it's human nature to when something abnormal or chaotic is happening, you got to stop and see, at least for a very brief period of time in regards to that. First off, my immediate reaction was, why would he do that? He had such a good gig. Why are you not going to do this for? And it might only be the last 2+ months of the season. It might very well just be that. But you had a good gig, man. Why would you even leave that even for a little bit? Like I would not. The amount of work that goes, we've heard so many coaches talk about it. We've heard like guys, Jimmy Johnson, I think, is the biggest example of how much he threw himself into being a head coach at both the collegiate and the professional level, and how in this stage in life, like he looks back on that and he understands what happened, but he is also very happy about the fact of what he's experienced ever since he stopped coaching. Like coaching will consume you, and it's not for everyone. It really isn't at the end of the day. So it's going to be interesting to see how it is for Jeff Saturday. Like you said, like the difference between high school and professional. I'm not going to disrespect any high school coaches. I fully respect all coaches at all levels, of course. And I'm sure there's a ton of work that goes into the high school game as well. But the professional level is a different beast, to say the very least. And it is going to be intriguing to see how he's going to adjust to that and in this little 2-month trial period that he has to be the interim coach. The only thing that I could take from this that I think could potentially work in Indy's way is that if they felt the locker room, if Frank Reich had lost the pulse of the locker room, which maybe he did. Like I will say this, in terms of most coaches, you can kind of get the feeling of that they've lost the pulse of the locker room. I don't know necessarily if that was the case with Reich. I think he was just underperforming to the max this season. I don't think he necessarily lost the locker room like it happens to a lot of coaches. Like Doug Peterson is a perfect example, coach in that division. He lost the Eagles locker room by the end of it, and in part because of the whole Carson Wentz drama that was happening. Like there were other factors there, but he did kind of lose that locker room to the very end of his tenure. I don't think it was the case here, but if they had an inkling of it, and maybe it wasn't the locker room wasn't fully behind him, I think bringing in a guy like a Jeff Saturday, who is well known in that organization, he's still been like very close to the organization for a while now. Like he's not a stranger to these guys. He has been to a number of Colts camps, a number of Colts, preseason games. I'm sure these guys are fully aware who he is. And I think a good thing with Indy is that they make sure that people understand what their legacy and history are. This isn't a guy that, even the young guys in that locker room are going to be like, who the hell is Jeff Saturday? That's not going to be the case here. They know who Jeff Saturday is. And I think the prestige in that organization that he has, he said it himself. I will say, I give him credit for having the swagger. He played with what he said, 5-6 Hall of Famers in his time when he was in Indy. And then that one lone season in Green Bay, he played with another one of the top 5-10 quarterbacks of all time as well. So Jeff Saturday has only ever played with some of the greatest at their relative positions in a couple of cases. So this is a guy who understands that portion of it. And I think in terms of understanding what these guys could be going through mentally, I actually think Jeff Saturday would be able to understand that. I think he could be a guy to connect with them on that level. So that is the one aspect of this that I think, if I had to look at a positive to take from it, I think he would be able to get these guys through the rest of the season mentally, whereas maybe Frank Reich wasn't able to do that anymore for the team. And again, we don't necessarily know that, but that's one of my guesses. It's a typical formula, Rick, in terms of you're starting to lose, and just as players, you drown out the coach. It's natural. It's nothing against the guy. It's not that they think he's a bad guy. It's just you're going to stop listening at some point. It's natural in all environments,
especially when you're saying the same things over and over and over again, obviously, and expecting what definition of insanity is repeating history over and over again, expecting a different result, right? Now that's a two. Winning is the great cure for all ailments. So if Jeff Saturday can go 5-3, get them to an 8-1. Mark by the end of the season, which would be awesome. But is that feasible? Because after Vegas, you've got Philadelphia, and then you have Pittsburgh, and then you have Dallas. And then after the bye, you've got the Chargers, the Vikings, the Giants, and the Texans. It's not a pretty schedule. It's not. For 8 games, it's a great tryout, but can he get 5 wins in those 8 games?
Yeah.
Is the team going to be that bolstered enough to get confidence to finish at 500? And get 5 wins and probably play spoiler to somebody's season. I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be interesting. I'm kind of with you in regards to, I think what Joe Thomas said was quite the statement. And I think only time will tell on how big of a statement that is. What I will say, what I could see the fallout of this happening, and we kind of figured this, and this is maybe a little bit of a spoiler for what we're going to talk about here in a couple of moments. We know who the Houston Texans are going to hire as their next head coach, just saying. So if we're being real here, the Indianapolis Colts have walked so the Houston Texans can run all the way to Josh McCown's P.O. box and make him their next head coach eventually.
Obviously.
The Houston Texans are like, whew, Indy did that for us. There's a standard now.
Yes, there's a standard now, yes.
There's
absolutely.
a standard. We can completely hire a guy who has 0 head coaching experience, has only coached in high school. And, the backlash has already been there for Indy. It's going to be slightly less now for Houston. I can't believe it. Indy helped the Houston Texans, not only giving them the tie at the very beginning of the season, doing this for them. What a way to help. What a way to help your division rival without even trying.
How about that, right?
How about that?
Man.
That's the biggest thing that I take from this. I will say, in all seriousness, when it comes to Joe Thomas's statement, I kind of get his concern, because will this set a potential idea in the head of certain owners to make decisions closer to this, not necessarily in the Jeff Saturday mold where they're going to hire someone with no experience, but our owners, and I'm saying owners because I think Jim Irsay had plenty of say in who they hired as the interim here, but is this going to set a standard of even less opportunities for, minority head coaches? If Joe Thomas, maybe he said in the most extreme way, but if that's a fear that he kind of has from this, I kind of get it, because this is the most extreme way. And being hockey guys, Rick, we understand the idea of a boys club and a boys culture. And that's what this hiring was at the end of the day. This was a complete, I'm not saying this from Jeff Saturday's perspective. He, like you said, he's one of the nicest human beings. This has nothing to do with my personal thoughts about him. This is from the Jim Irsay's perspective and his decision to be a part of this. This is a boys club move written all over it. It just is.
I mean, when you consider the fact, too, that Jim Irsay has been the most public owner speaking out against Dan Snyder possibly selling the Commanders, and then he goes and does something like this. Yeah, I can kind of see where you're talking about that kind of cannon fodder going against Irsay there. I will say this on the opposite side of the spectrum. Why not? I mean, look, I'll go at it from the analyst to the head coach role because Jeff Saturday was an ESPN guy. Aaron Boone was an ESPN guy, never coached in the pros before. And, has it worked? I mean, they haven't won a title, but, they didn't win a title with, since 09. So that was not all Aaron Boone's fault, the Yankees. But if you're talking about that possibly being a trend, that I think is a little more concerning to me, is that the way to get a head coaching job is now apparently to go to ESPN and be an analyst and then be a head coach instead of paying your dues through the coaching rank system. If it's that way, I agree with it. But if it's this way, look, again, sometimes they've made overtures to him before. So sometimes you reward a guy who, you made overtures to, and now it's a chance. My question is, if it doesn't work out, will Irsay, in your mind, then say, well, listen, whoever the new head coach is has to keep Saturday on as an offensive line coach? That's a question mark because, again, they got him. They wanted him for years. They got him. And they're going to probably do whatever it takes to keep him. So,
yeah. And it's going to be real interesting to see how that happens. And there have been a few cases, not just in the NFL, but just in sports in general, where it's like the owner will step in and be like, hey, we got to keep this guy on staff. Jerry Jones wanted to keep Kellen Moore on staff the entire time. This literally just happened recently. Insistent that Kellen Moore has to stay on staff and preferably be the offensive coordinator. And lo and behold, Now, granted, the Cowboys are looking really good this season, but it's not because of the offense, to say the very least.
No, that's true.
So, we'll see what happens there in Indy. This is going to go one of two ways. If there is one more positive to potentially take from this, is that even if Saturday completely flounders in this role and the Colts bottom out, you've been missing that franchise quarterback. This could be the class where you get the next one. This could be that class for you. And with the way the standings are going right now, and certain teams, the way their record are, that they could have a high first round pick, but they don't necessarily need a quarterback. This could put you in a very good position where you may not need to trade up to get a quarterback you want. So if there is one positive to take away ultimately at the very end of this, is that Indy could be setting themselves up from Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck. Is their next successor here is the question. And that would probably be the best case scenario, really, if you're Indy at this point, because even if Saturday does well, you still need a quarterback for next season.
No, you do.
It's not Sam Ehlinger. And it's not Matt Ryan, apparently. So
it's also not Nick Foles because, you forget he's still on the roster, too.
I was so disappointed that Frank Reich didn't go with him. I wonder why he didn't.
I feel like, it was a time to see what the kid could do. You can't catch lightning in the bottle twice. And that's what happened with Nick Foles. So you can't do that again. So.
True. I mean, he's kind of done it 3 times because he started as the backup before he had a season of 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. So,
well, yeah, that's true. That's true. But also Frank Reich himself as a player had the greatest college football comeback and the greatest NFL comeback in football history. At some point, the luck runs out.
Very true. Very true. Yeah. Like the luck ran out after his first season in Indy.
That's accurate.
But yeah, that's the way to summarize it. Intriguing hire, to say the least, in Indy. We'll see how it all works out. And I don't think I mentioned it, but I'm with you, Rick. Frank Reich's going to get a job in this league very soon. He's probably going to end up being on the coaching staff of a new head coach this offseason because he is a very good offensive mind. He is at minimum going to be the quarterback's coach and probably the offensive coordinator, if anything. Actually, I don't even think he'll be the quarterback. I think he'll be the offensive coordinator for some new head coach's coaching staff for the next hiring period. Speaking of which, perfect transition for that, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our head coach hot seat. Boom. Love the graphic, don't you? It's getting hot in here, isn't it?
Oh, my stars.
So this was the plan, ladies and gentlemen. We were always going to talk about head coaches being on the hot seat, but Indy made things more interesting, to say the very least, because they took off one of the coaches from our hot seats that we had to talk about, Frank Reich. But we still have a couple coaches that we're going to discuss on here. We have a list of about definitively 6 that we're going to talk about that are for sure on the hot seat, and a couple outside looking in. It's never a true list, Rick, if you don't have a good old outside looking in. OLI.
OLI.
Took me a minute there. I'm like, wait.
Yeah.
I was about to say OIL. Like, wait, oil? No, that doesn't work. What am I?
The dyslexia got to you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it gets to me a lot. So we're going to be talking about that. But just like we're talking about Indianapolis, ladies and gentlemen, we have our man, our games master, joining us in via video to get the conversation rolling. Justin, get us started.
All right, we're talking coaches on the hot seat. And it's funny because at the beginning of the season, we were talking about certain coaches being on the hot seat. We did actually mention the two that have been fired already. But I think if you were to listen to our other suggestions, we were pretty far off. I think at one point I said Pete Carroll. Um, I, a lot of these guys are playing really well, and it's interesting to see now who looks like they may not have a job next year. The three that I would probably think are in the toughest position right now, believe it or not, are a couple of first-year head coaches in Nathaniel Hackett, who just can't seem to get that offense going. I think they scored more points last year with Teddy Bridgewater, and whether or not it's because of Russ, I think is a moot point at this point. I mean, you have to be able to score. You still have 52 NFL players on that roster, and I know you're playing against 52 other NFL players, but at some point, you have to be able to get the guys who are the playmakers on your team. You have to get them the ball in their hands and let them do something. I don't understand what's going on with Melvin Gordon. Maybe he's not the guy there. I know they traded for Chase Edmonds. I know that their offensive line is in shambles currently, but they got a few actually good young receivers in that locker room who should be running all over the field. You need to find ways to scheme them open and get them the ball. I know Russ has missed a couple of guys, but there's an issue as far as offensive scheming, especially for a guy that you brought in because he is an offensive schemer. And that being said, the other first-year head coach is Josh McDaniels. I don't understand what seems to be going on. Again, maybe it's an issue with the quarterback because Derek Carr has been very up and down this year. But for Devontae Adams to have 130-something yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half and be held to 1 catch in the second half versus the Jacksonville Jaguars is the epitome of what the hell is going on with the Raiders. It just is. And I know that they've come out and said his job is safe, but you were brought in as an offensive guy, as the offensive mastermind behind this team, and you were going to be the difference. They had a good offensive season last year. Josh Jacobs is having the best season of his career. You went out and traded for the best receiver in football. And I know Darren Waller is unhealthy, and I know maybe Hunter Renfrow is having a more disappointing season, but your weapons are performing. Devontae Adams is having a good year, and yet you can't seem to find him the ball, get him the ball on a consistent basis. Mac Hollins is playing well. I don't know why he's leading your team in targets, but he's playing well. So I'm not sure what's going on with the Raiders, and we might be looking at another coach next year in Las Vegas. I'm not saying he's going to get fired during the middle of the season like some of these other guys, but they need to sit down and take a long, hard look at what they're doing because they don't seem to be good on either side of the ball, especially now that they've given up 3 double-digit possessions in the fourth quarter. And the final coach that is on the hot seat for me is not a new coach, but he is an offensive guy. He was brought in to help that offense thrive. And I know there has been issues with drafting, but the Green Bay Packers have to be better than a 6-game losing streak. They have not been playing the cream of the crop in the league. I know they played excuse me. I know they played Buffalo, but I mean, who'd they lose to? Let's bring up their record. Hold on. They lost to the Lions with 3 red zone interceptions by Aaron Rodgers. They lost to the Commanders in that 5-game losing streak, and the Jets and Giants, fine. They've been very good teams this year. The Bills, arguably the best team in the league. I'll give it to you. You can't lose these games. I have no confidence that they're going to win any of these games, even late early in December when they play the Bears. Justin Fields is not the same quarterback that you shut down at the beginning of the year. And now you don't have Rashawn Gary, who you lost for the rest of the year with a torn ACL. LaFleur has to be worried about his job because as an offensive coach with a two-time MVP, back-to-back MVP, he's a four-time MVP and surefire Hall of Famer, known for his accuracy. He's thrown more interceptions this year than I think he did in the past 2 seasons combined. This is not good if you're a Green Bay Packers fan, and you might be looking at a new coach next year.
Hot stuff there by Justin. Only the hottest stuff for our head coach hot seats that we are going to discuss. He brought up 3 of the definitive 6 names that we have right there. So perfect timing for that, Justin. Thank you so much, my man. But before we get to that, we actually have 2 names that are outside looking in that we're going to briefly touch upon, brought to the table by one podfather himself. So Rick, in this case, you are going to deliver these 2 names to the people. And we're essentially going to describe the logic as to why they're not on the definitive list for now, but maybe they could be later in the season.
Yeah, so I want to start with the team that beat Green Bay in that 6-game losing streak. That's the Washington Commanders. And I mean, look, there was a lot of talk by us going on the offseason about Ron Rivera's job possibly being up in the air because, can you be 7-10 3 years in a row and all of that? But now the conversation's more about, will Ron Rivera be the head coach if the Commanders have a new ownership group? Because there's a lot of talk about Dan Snyder possibly selling the team. There's been a lot of people who've been interested in buying the team, Jay-Z, Jeff Bezos, that I can't say the word on air, but you know what I'm thinking about. Kevin Durant, Matthew McConaughey as well. It's becoming like a conglomerate of, just craziness to possibly own the Commanders. Now, again, that's the question. With a new ownership group, will it be a whole new GM? Will it be a whole new group? And I mean, while Ron Rivera had his struggles, Taylor Heineke's, I think, kind of saved his bacon for a bit. I think that, they've done a lot better in the past 4 weeks. They could have been, I think, 4-0. Obviously, the Minnesota game was close, but, props to them. They hung in. And with Carson Wentz, their quarterback, they wouldn't have hung in. I think Heineke's the difference maker. He's the heart and soul of that team. So I think having him in has really kind of buoyed the Commanders further. And it's a tough division. If they can kind of get back to relevancy and make it like a 4-way fight at the end, I think they'll be okay. So Ron Rivera is not on this list, but again, his seat should be a little warm, but not at the hot that we're thinking of. And then Kevin Stefanski from the Cleveland Browns. This is all predicated on Deshaun Watson coming back in December, but again, with that specter hanging over your head, Jacoby Brissett's been playing pretty well for the Browns, and they've been in a lot of games. I mean, attribute that to Cade York all you want, but at the same point in time, Stefanski has kind of been Cleveland's best coach in the last 2 decades. I feel bad saying that for poor Romeo Crennel, but, it's the truth. I mean, Stefanski's been a revelation in Cleveland. Now, the ownership there, the Hasms are a little bit of a question mark, I think. They could make a very snap decision very, very quickly on. But I feel like Stefanski's going to be okay and going to ride it out. If nothing else, maybe we'll talk about him at the end of the season, depending on how Deshaun Watson fares. But again, he wasn't the guy who brought in Deshaun Watson. That wasn't Stefanski's call. And the teams looked decent enough. I mean, Nick Chubb's one of the best running backs that are have one of the best seasons, I think, so far of all running backs. The defense has been pretty okay. And again, Jacoby Brissett's been a serviceable backup. I mean, I think he's almost at 2,000 passing yards, which you expect that from a backup in this regard. So I think those 2 guys are on our outside looking in. There are fringe candidates, if you will, but you can make arguments either way about whether they belong on these hot seats or whether they don't.
Yeah, I think you said all the reasons for both of them there. I think Ron Rivera, it's predominantly going to depend on if there is new ownership and does that new ownership decide that they just want to clean house of dang near every position. And that's not even just talking about football operations and on the field stuff. It's also talking about within the organization as a whole, off the stuff that doesn't have to do with the on the field product. So it'll be interesting there to say the very least. A lot of the Washington situation, which I mean I'm sure people probably noticed, we haven't talked too much about it, guys, because let's be real here, there isn't really too much to talk about with that until we do get definitive word that there is any sort of close agreement on Dan Snyder selling the team to a new ownership group and what that could be like. So that's part of the reason why we haven't really discussed it all that much. So I'm with that logic. And in terms of Kevin Stefanski, my whole thing with him is he got them a playoff win. And it was the first Browns playoff win in the new since they became like this iteration of the Cleveland Browns. So in that situation, I think he should get a little bit of leeway. I know the Hasms can be very weird, but I think for the most part, his job is safe. It would take something completely out of left field, I think, in order for that situation to change. what it could be. Who knows? I mean, he went 11-5 his first year, won Coach of the Year that year. And then even last year, despite the disappointing season it was, they still got 8-9, just a game below 500. That's not the worst. Actually, there's no 500 anymore. A tie from 500, technically speaking. So not that bad, and they've been pretty competitive this season. They've blown. I mean, mainly that Jets game was the main one that they completely blew for themselves. But aside from that, it's been fine. And Jacoby Brissett, yes, we've sung his praises a lot. This is a pro Jacoby Brissett, so relatively speaking, he's a good backup quarterback, good slot fill-in starter. But I think it's been proven he like a 16-17 game starter. He is not, and that's okay. Not everyone is, but they've done the best they can to this point. I think he gets a little bit of leeway there in that regard. And I think it's also pretty clear, like we were talking about with Reich, and maybe if he lost that locker room, I don't think he's lost that locker room at all. I think that locker room still responds very well to Kevin Stefanski. And barring anything drastic, I think his job is safe. So let's talk about the coaches that Justin brought up. Let's talk about, all right, the hot seat O-meter. Of course, we got 1 to 5, 1 being ice cold, we're overreacting, don't got to worry about it, versus 5, scorching hot. That dude is going to get fired, and is going to be team branding on his backside when it's all said and done. So let's get to it. Nathaniel Hackett, Rick, what is your rating for him on the head coach hot seat meter?
I have Nathaniel Hackett for me at a 4. Look, there's been so much more hype going into this season with Denver, with a new quarterback, with a new weapon set, with all the excitement of, oh, this guy was the offensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. He was the guy who worked with Aaron Rodgers. They look like they're pretty good and all of that. And it just has not materialized at all. And it's not that they're losing games because they're not playing well. It's not like they're losing close games. Like, sure they are, but they're just uninspired. Like, when you have a game in your own home stadium that 9-9 going to overtime, and your fans start leaving because they don't care about the result because your team is that terrible, that should tell you something about where your direction is. This team just does not look at all ready to go. They have only scored over 20 points twice. Now, has the defense been good? Sure, the defense has been fine. They're, I feel like the most points they've given up is 32 to the Raiders, but after that, they've had games where they've given up 12, 10, 16. The defense has been solid, but you expect more when you bring in a quarterback who has that pedigree and that championship caliber talent to actually be a better guy. And I think there's little steps here and there, miscommunications in the huddle, bad communication between the quarterback and the head coach, and a lot of it's going to be on Nathaniel Hackett because they got Russell Wilson for a long, long time. And so it's just not working out at all. And this is a Denver team that we expected a lot better from. We really did. And so I have him at a 4. I have his seat very uncomfortable. I'm not scorching hot, but very uncomfortable for Nathaniel Hackett.
Right. I'm with you. I'm on a 4, and it could very well become a 5 after this weekend for all we know, or this weekend or next week, depending on, the results. This is a big reason why. I just want to throw a couple numbers because you mentioned the defense here, Rick. Let me just throw out a couple teams here in the idea of points allowed. Tennessee Titans, first in the AFC South. Not much of an achievement, but they're first. Points allowed, 158. Mm-hmm. Baltimore Ravens and Cincinnati Bengals, top 2 teams in the AFC North right now. Ravens points allowed, 196. Bengals points allowed, 185. The fact that both those teams are very heavily in the positive point differential just goes to show how amazing their offenses are. Exactly. The Buffalo Bills, a plus 118 for their points allowed. I believe best in the AFC overall. And the New York Jets, 176 right now. Second in that division. The Dolphins, a team that a lot of people believe are going to challenge for a playoff spot, 224. The Denver Broncos points allowed is 132 points allowed.
Yeah.
That defense has played phenomenal.
They have.
The offense, 121 points for. There is one team in the AFC worse than them. Do you want to guess that team, Rick?
It's got to be the Steelers.
That is correct. And by how much?
1 point.
1 point.
Yeah, 1 point.
The Pittsburgh Steelers with Mitchell Trubisky and Kenny Pickett are 1 point offensively worse than the Russell Wilson-led Denver Broncos this season. And it's not just that. I think the context of why we expected more from Denver this season, Rick, I think a lot of people are forgetting as to what we thought of them. We did, of the teams in the AFC West, we expected them to finish with the worst in-division record.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Out of division, the Broncos finished 4th place last year in the AFC West. because the Chiefs won the division, the Raiders made the playoffs, and the Chargers were a game away. The Broncos finished worse. The way that NFL scheduling structure works is that wherever you place in your division, you're going to face another team in another division that was the same place. So they are struggling this much, facing a couple other fourth-place teams from last year. That's why there were expectations for this team, because comparative to the rest of that division, and even some of the rest of the AFC for wildcard purposes, they had an easier schedule on paper. And yes, you could say that certain teams that they have faced have performed better than expected. Okay, that's fine. But even still, 121 points for that, you're only better than the Steelers. And Matt Canada, the fact you're only 1 point better than Matt Canada offensively is not a ringing endorsement. It's just not.
It's not.
And actually, if I look at the entirety of the NFL, that is the second worst overall in the league. Third worst would actually surprise you, believe it or not. But second worst in the NFL is that offense. And a team that has a number one receiver in Cortland Sutton, that has, going into the season, Jerry Jeudy, who we all believe to be that deep vertical threat, who had a running back duo, again, going into the season. I know Javonte Williams is now hurt, but it didn't look like they knew what to do with Javonte Williams or Melvin Gordon when they had them both healthy to begin with. It's just been a complete falling apart of this offense, and we look at the next 4 games for this team. I'll go through because that 4th game is against the Ravens. I think we are expecting something there. But the next 3 games are the Tennessee Titans, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Carolina Panthers. Realistically, we're talking about potential to save the season. This 3-game stretch is going to decide Nathaniel Hackett's future right here, because that Tennessee Titans game is a winnable game, whether it's Ryan Tannehill or Malik Willis, because death taxes, and I will never give Ryan Tannehill any starting quarterback credit. The Las Vegas Raiders have been just as bad as you, and we're just about to talk about them in a moment here. Mm-hmm. And it's the Carolina Panthers, who, yes, they may have beaten the Atlanta Falcons. Shout out to XFL MVP PJ Walker, but the Panthers have not been good this season.
No.
This is going to be the 3-game stretch that, even if it doesn't get them into the quote-unquote playoff picture, and even if they're going to fall out of it, because funny enough, the next 3 games after those 3, Rick, are the Ravens, the Chiefs, and the Cardinals.
Okay, goodbye. Start packing the golf clubs.
Start packing the golf clubs. But I'm not so worried about the way that they're going to end this. They're ending the season rough, actually, after this 3-game stretch. Oh, dear.
I'd be worried.
This 3-game stretch is going to decide his job security. If he doesn't go 2-1 in these next 3 games, all 3 are very much winnable. I think his goose is cooked, because the end of the season, I can sort of understand. They are facing top-tier competition. They faced the Chiefs twice in the span of 5 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 5 weeks.
Yeah,
I can forgive it. They faced the Chargers to end the season. I can forgive it.
Yep.
I cannot forgive if you drop any of these next 3 games by a wide margin. If you go 2-1, and if your loss was to the Titans and it was by a touchdown, I can kind of get that. Derrick Henry's a beast. But realistically, there is a scenario where come November 27th is that game. So come November 28th, the Monday of November 28th, we could say the Denver Broncos are 6-5. That's a possibility. And Nathaniel Hackett, your job is on the line in this 3-game stretch. Simple as that.
I will say this too. I mean, I want competition if I'm Denver. Like, if you lose to Tennessee, fine, but at least make it like competitive 34-31, where they had to beat you on the final play of the game sort of thing. Make it competitive, because every other game, Denver's been sleepwalking through. And you can say, oh, yeah, but they won their last game. Do you know what the score was against Jacksonville in London? It was 21-17. It was not – I mean, Trevor Lawrence also gave away a lot of turnovers there. But you can't sleepwalk against these teams that you should be beating. As Jurg, you mentioned, they were the 4th best – they were the 4th team in the division. They get the 4th best teams in their other divisions. How's that worked out for them? Seattle? No, Seattle hasn't been good. Jacksonville wasn't – it was a win, but I wasn't convinced. Were you convinced? No one was convinced. So, I look at it and I just say, nah. If you go 2-1, make them competitive. Win convincingly and lose that game in a competitive mindset. Don't pull a Frank Reich and lose 26-3. Then we'll talk about midseason firings.
Yeah. It's rough to say the least for Denver, and the potential and promise that they had going into this. It looks rough, and especially that Russell Wilson contract extension looks worse and worse.
Ugh, brutal. I'm starting to fall in line with you about Russell Wilson, by the way.
Oh my God. I have been saying this for years.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, hop on the train. Russell Wilson is a corporate shill and a stooge.
Yes.
And overrated. Next team that Justin brought up, the Las Vegas Raiders. The AFC West is really struggling this year, right?
Yeah.
If you're not a good team, your head coach is on the hot seat right now, apparently.
Right.
Josh McDaniels, his second go-around as a head coach. Funny enough, his second go-around in the AFC West.
Yep.
Maybe he should have stayed away from this job.
Probably.
Maybe he should have stayed away. 2-6 record. Oh, dear Lord, it has been bad. Their 2 wins this season, of course, are against the mighty Houston Texans and over the Denver Broncos, funny enough. So all that goes around. But I think the biggest thing for me, Rick, and Josh McDaniels, his head coaching meter for me, I am going to put it, I think some people might be shocked, but I have a reason for this. I'm going to put it as a 3. And
Okay.
this is my reason for it. Yes, what the evidence Justin gave us is damning. Derek Carr has not looked like what we thought he would. Devontae Adams has been great in instances, but the problem is he hasn't been properly used enough in these games. If it's like they'll find a way to use him on 1 or 2 possessions in a game, where you got to find a way to be able to use him throughout the entire game. But my biggest thing, this is completely off the field, and I know it's kind of weird to say this, but I mean, we kind of mentioned it for Washington, and I got to bring it up with Vegas. I don't think that Mark Davis is going to be willing to pay out another head coach right now. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know what the financial situation was with releasing Gruden. I don't know how much that they've had to pay him, or if they've even had to yet, because I think Gruden, I don't know if he was going to file something against the Raiders in terms of getting any money. In some way, shape, or form, there's that situation with how it ended with Gruden, and now you're going to fire McDaniels and have to pay out that contract as well. I don't see Mark Davis doing that. And I know it's weird to say that, but you want to talk about owners, it is well known. It is notorious at this point that in terms of being a straight cash owner, Mark Davis is probably the worst of the 32. It's a known fact. And I don't think he's going to be willing. He just had to release a guy, what was it, 4 years into a 10-year deal, I think?
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to fire a guy 1 year into a deal, which is either 3 or 4 years. I forget what the exact contract term for McDaniels' head coaching deal was, but I don't think he's going to fire a guy year 1 and have to pay out another coach. So that's the only reason why I think he might get a second year out of this, despite how poorly things are going. But the thing that Justin mentioned, the blown leads, it really goes to show in the NFL that how much things can change. Blowing that lead against the Arizona Cardinals, blowing the lead against the Kansas City Chiefs, and now blowing the lead against Jacksonville with a poor performance against the Saints where they got shut out, and also a poor performance against the Tennessee Titans where that was before Tennessee kind of hit their current stride. Rough goings. Josh McDaniels certainly needs to be able to prove himself. But as of now, I can still see a scenario where his job is relatively safe. This could go up, but because I'm thinking, especially as Mark Davis, I have to try to think of what he would do. I don't think he would want to fire Josh McDaniels at this point with how things are going. I think he's going to give him time, so that's why I have him as a 3.
I see the reasoning for the 3. I have him as a 4. It hasn't worked. You gave Derek Carr a massive contract extension with a no trade clause, and it hasn't worked. And I'm going to go to something that Brandon Marshall said about Josh McDaniels, and I'm gonna quote Brandon Marshall when I say this. Josh McDaniels is not suited to be a head coach because he doesn't know how to lead people. You can have all the X's and O's in the world, but when you go into a losing locker room, the first thing you have to do is to be able to get into the players' minds and their hearts. And he is not capable of doing that. End quote. Brandon Marshall played under a Josh McDaniels system, I believe, when he was in Denver. It's possible. I mean, it might be a little bit off, but time-wise, but I think so. I've never liked Josh McDaniels as a coach. I think he comes from that same mold where I'm the offensive guru and I know better than you and la-di-da-di-da. Well, Adam Gase did so well in New York, and see what happened there. We thought a lot better about this Vegas team. We really did. We thought that they were going to be studs. We thought that they were going to compete with Kansas City for that division. And Justin made a great point. How do you go from Devontae Adams, who is the number 1 wide receiver in the game, having 130 yards receiving in the first half, to 1 target in the second half? And it wasn't even that the defense shaded away from him. Why would you go away from the target that you know is going to give you the best results? And it was the Jaguars that did that. The Jaguars. Brutal. But yeah, Josh McDaniels, I think, can be a good coordinator, but I don't see him in that head coach mold. And I think you're right. Everything you said about Mark Davis is accurate, but I think even Mark Davis has to know when to cut the cord if it's just not working. I mean, John Gruden didn't work for other reasons, and we know what those reasons are. But I'm gonna tell you this: he's wishing Mark Davis is right now that he had Rich Bisaccia back, because Rich Bisaccia was the man who led them to the playoffs, and he was the heart and soul of that team. He was the guy who lifelong assistant coach. Like, I go back to Philadelphia, the Phillies, like Rob Thompson, lifelong assistant coach, gets the one job of manager. Rob Thompson goes to the World Series because the players bought in. Rich Bisaccia, the players bought into him. They're not buying into Josh McDaniels. They're not buying into this system. They're not buying into his mindset and his focus. And it's showing. They're not a good offensive team, and they should be. They should be a lot better than they are. And again, like we'll see what happens. I will tell you this: I will upgrade it to a 5 if Josh McDaniels loses this weekend to Jeff Saturday in his first ever NFL head coaching position. If he loses, it's a 5. Yeah. No question about it. No question for me. But it is a strong 4. It's not as high a 4 as Nathaniel Hackett. Maybe it's like a 4.5, whereas Hackett's like a 4.75. But it's a strong 4 for me for McDaniels.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm not giving Mark Davis any credit. That's probably part of the reason why I'm doing this. And, but I'm with you. If he does lose to Jeff Saturday, it's a full 5 for me.
Oh my God,
it is bad. How quickly, if they do decide to part ways after the season, how quickly should Mark Davis make the phone call to Green Bay to interview Rich Bisaccia?
Immediately,
immediately.
Absolutely immediately. That was your guy. You had something special there with him because again. You got to the playoffs. You didn't win, but you were in it until the very end, and you were out of it until you took over. And he built something really cool there. And unfortunately, now he's wallowing in stress because of what's going on with Green Bay. Transition.
Yep. Perfect right there. The last team that Justin brought up, and the midway point of our list, because this is coach number 3 of 6, Matt LaFleur. A guy who I was 50-50 on putting on this list until this past loss, where I'm like, put him on. 3-6 record now, 5-game losing streak for the Packers after a 3-1 start. Let's put the whole thing together and how quickly this has fallen apart, Rick. 3 straight 13-win seasons for Matt LaFleur to start off his tenure with the Packers. Back-to-back NFC Championship game appearances, losing to the San Francisco 49ers, who made it to the Super Bowl, of course, and then losing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who won the Super Bowl. So they only lost to great teams. And then the third year, 13-4. I believe they had the top seed in the NFC again last year. Home playoff game against San Fran. Offense goes away. Defense did its job. Special teams was rough. That's actually why they really went for Rich Bisaccia, and they got him because he's an amazing special teams coordinator. But it has fallen apart at the seams for the Green Bay Packers. I want to throw this to you first because I want to hear your rating for Matt LaFleur right now. A guy who we've seen him have success, and coaches tend to get some leeway, but it has really fallen off, I think, even worse than what we could have predicted at the start of the season. We knew it would be a struggle for the Packers. We thought that the division was still weak enough that they could take advantage. Well, some of us did. But at the end of it, it is not looking good in Green Bay. Rick, what is your hot seat meter for Matt LaFleur?
Titletown is owned by 537,460 stockholders, governed by a board of directors with a chairman, Mark Murphy. So there's no owner really to answer to. It's all those fans. 5. It is a 5 for Matt LaFleur. You cannot lose to the Detroit Lions, especially in the manner in which you lost. Now, granted, I picked the Lions this year, and I'm suffering for it. But let's talk about this. The season started, and not only did you lose to the Vikings, you lost convincingly to the Vikings. And then Giants lost in London. Jets lost where you were out of it completely. Commanders lost. I was happy, but let's be real here. Bills lost. You had no shot. And then this loss to the Lions. And now you have the Cowboys coming in. And as much as we want to say it, as bad as we say the Titans are, they're going to come in next on a short week. You have 2 home games, one Sunday, one Thursday. You got to turn around quickly. Matt LaFleur is in a lot of trouble. And a lot of this has to do with the fact that they are so reliant on Aaron Rodgers, who refuses basically to incorporate these younger talents into his system. When I was in Tampa this weekend, and I was listening to their radio talk about Aaron Rodgers this, Aaron Rodgers that. He has started to roll his eyes at Matt LaFleur, which did to Mike McCarthy. He has started to no-show the audible because he wants to run the plays he wants to run. He has decided he wants to do his thing. It's basically, in a sense, like LeBron bringing in all of his buddies to play on a team and not have a coach there. Like, David Blatt was a great coach in Europe, but when he came over to the United States to coach the Cavs, he ran into all-ego LeBron James, Matt LaFleur, all-ego Aaron Rodgers. It's the same thing. And unfortunately, the problem is that one person has to go, whether it's LaFleur or it's Rodgers. Well, Aaron Rodgers ain't going anywhere. And even if Aaron Rodgers does go somewhere, the cupboard is so bare, you have nobody. You've not given Jordan Love any time to learn, to develop, to actually have in-game feelings. You've got nothing. You've got no backup quarterback, no third-string quarterback. At least when Brett Favre came to Green Bay, there was something in place, and he ended up doing something. And you know what? When Aaron Rodgers came into Green Bay, there was something in place. It was Brett Favre. There's nothing in place at all here for Green Bay. That's on the ownership. That's on the head coach. That's on the quarterback. Matt LaFleur, you are in deep, deep trouble. And I can honestly foresee this Green Bay team not winning at all in November because you've got Dallas, you've got Tennessee, and you've got Philadelphia coming in. And then December 4th, you play Chicago. But you're going to tell me that this is probably going to be somewhere around an 8-game losing streak, possibly, potentially? Yeah, Matt LaFleur might not survive to December at this point. It's not pretty in Green Bay at all.
I could see them letting him remain coach for that Bears game, and if they lose that game, he's gone. Because you got to at least still be able to lord over the little brothers in the division. And if you can't do that, which you've already lost the first game to Detroit, if you can't do that, it is not good. And by the way, there's a second game against the Vikings as well.
Yep.
That's in December.
Off a bye, too.
Off a bye. It's not looking good for the Green Bay Packers right now. It's so many different factors. You mentioned Aaron Rodgers. It's clear that on a number of plays, he likes to make the decisions himself. But I think it's also clear that LaFleur, him and Rodgers just aren't working anymore. And it's a number of factors. It is Aaron Rodgers trying to take things into his own hand. But I also feel part of it is that Matt LaFleur, he's kind of lost what could work for this team. And we understand the limitations that they have, but Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, especially Aaron Jones, has been phenomenal this season. And if part of it is Aaron Rodgers making the audibles, I can understand it, but there is something wrong with this team where if Aaron Jones had gotten to touch the ball way more in some of these losses, not all, but some, they could have probably won the game. The Lions one is winnable, of course. That goes without saying. The Reskins, or the Commanders, as we can call them. That one was very much winnable. Justin brings up the Jets and the Giants. The thing was, we didn't have these thoughts about either of those teams until those games. Funny enough, we did not see the Giants as this dark horse team until that Packers win. And we, all due respect to the Jets, Rick, we didn't see them as this kind of team until we saw that Packers win.
Right.
Those should have been winnable games, and the Giants won especially because they had the lead. They had a double-digit lead. So you want to talk about blowing it? Matt LaFleur has blown it. It's just something not there with him and Aaron Rodgers right now. And I think you're right. It's going to be between one of the two of them. And Aaron Rodgers' dead cap next season, because this season we know nothing's obviously going to happen. Next season, his cap hit is $31.6 million. The dead cap is $99 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, 2024, funny enough, it actually gets a little bit more palatable from there in terms of cap hit versus dead cap hit. But it just in terms of feasibly being able to, I mean, would there be a team that would take Aaron Rodgers? I actually could probably see it. But in terms of the structure of this organization, I think last year when we talked about it being the last quote unquote, and we're overusing this term now in sports, but the last dance for the Packers, that was literally it for that team. That was literally it. And we thought it was just it of that current run. No, I think their Super Bowl window slammed shut now. So I'm with you. It's a 5 on the hot seat for me.
So let me pull this out for you, a little historical background for you. The last time the Green Bay Packers lost 2 games to the Detroit Lions in the same season was 2018. But the last time that it was the same coach who lost 2 games to the Lions in the same season was 2017. Mike McCarthy. Because in 18, they played the Lions again after he got fired. Go back to 1991 for the last time it happened. Lindy Infante was their head coach. They lost twice to the Lions at 4-12. He was fired right after the season for Mike Holmgren. So the pattern tells you lose 2 games to the Lions, start packing up your office. If they do not beat the Lions this year, they're looking for a new head coach. Absolutely. The pattern of the past will tell you that. Absolutely will.
Yep. And will they be looking for a potential future starting quarterback? Will this be the last hurrah of Aaron Rodgers? And in no way near the way that we thought it was, because we're talking about training. Could he just decide to retire this year is the question. Who knows with him at this point? Like, I don't know. Would it really be above him to just leave the team like, $99 million in dead cap about that? Now, will he probably? I'm not sure, because he did just sign that contract. So
Yeah, but you've seen Aaron Rodgers be all about himself. Honestly, we've seen that, and I mean it's a matter of the fact that he's only in the game to kind of satisfy his own needs and objectives. So I feel like there's a potential that if this does not work out, and if Green Bay finishes in last place in the NFC North, which is a possibility, he'll probably take his ball and run somewhere. But he can't host Jeopardy because Ken Jennings is there, so he lost out on that chance, buddy.
Yeah. Should Aaron Rodgers have just went to host Jeopardy and not done this with the Packers?
Probably.
Who would have thought?
Probably.
Poor. I can't even say poor Aaron, because I think Ken Jennings, at least from what I understand, has done a good enough job. So
Yes, he's done a great job. He really has.
So there we go. So that is the halfway point with our head coaches on the hot seat meter. Let's keep it going. This next one is probably the most consensus one we have here, Rick. Lovie Smith and the Houston Texans. You want to talk about transitional head coaches.
Oof. Big time.
I feel weird about giving this a rating, because I feel like he was literally put there to be a transition / lame duck no matter what. And you could also honestly argue that it was a similar thing with the previous Houston Texans head coach as well. So, with David Culley. This has nothing to do with my thoughts about what Lovie Smith is actually like record-wise or anything like that. I actually think the locker room loves him. I think the Houston Texans locker room has responded. Their defense has played well in certain instances this season. Derek Stingley is a phenomenal corner.
He's a beast. He's a beast.
Him and Sauce Gardner have been amazing, to say the least. And it's very obvious that Davis Mills, we like the gimmick for a little bit, but he's not the quarterback of the future there.
He's not.
They need to do a lot of building. And when are they going to bring in that new head coach? It's an interesting decision. I kind of made the joke earlier, but I honestly do think that this team is looking to make the Josh McCown move this offseason upcoming. So I'm going to say a 5 for Lovie Smith. Nothing to do against him. I think he's in a situation like with David Culley. I think no matter what this season, I think he was going to just be here. And I think it was an internal understanding. I think they told him, like, hey, Lovie, we're going to keep it real with you. We need a transition here. And I think it's him. So I'm going to give it a 5. Sorry, Lovie.
See, I was in the same camp as you. I was going to say a 5, and then I had a thought, and so now I'm going to go lower, and it's going to surprise you. I'm going to go down to a 3.
Okay.
And here's my thought here. I'm going to liken this to what we've just seen in the NBA, where the Brooklyn Nets got rid of Steve Nash, and they wanted Ime Udoka, who was suspended by the Celtics. But then Adam Silver stepped in and said something, and Jacques Vaughn went from interim to their permanent head coach in about a week. Something tells me that the NFL is going to look at this, and they're going to say to Nick Caserio and to the Texans, look, we let David Culley slide, but you are not firing Lovie Smith after one season for no reason because you want to bring your guy in there. Lovie Smith has to stay in for at least one more year. And it might not be a positive thing, but again, Lovie Smith, I think, is a good coach. He's doing the best that he can with what he got, and that's the same thing David Culley did. But at some point, the NFL has to look at this and say, why are you constantly tanking and bringing in a revolving door of head coaches? I think this is a bigger issue than the head coach, and I think Lovie Smith has earned enough of a pedigree where he will – look, you're right. The offense needs a lot of help. And – Brandon Cooks not getting traded at the deadline was a surprise to me, but I feel like there were reasons that we don't know about. But Davis Mills isn't the answer. Now, can a guy like Will Levis be the answer from Kentucky? Probably. He's got a big arm. He can probably do some things. I think if nothing else, I would say it would have been a 5, but this is also the most obvious one. But for me, based upon other trends that we've seen, I put it at a 3 because he may be fired, but I don't think he deserves to be fired as much as the guys that are above him, I would say. And I think that it might be a case where stability might win out and he might stay for another year. And who knows? Next year, they might be better. I'll win 5 games instead of 3. You never know. But, progress is progress. It's just, again, you want to take a franchise and try and lead them to relevancy. You don't want to be the Pittsburgh Pirates of the NFL, basically. So I feel like that might be a case where the NFL might step in and basically demand that Lovie Smith stays. Because it also is a bad look for the league if you fire 2 African-American head coaches in back-to-back years to bring in Josh McCown. It would be a nightmarish PR move for them. And I think the NFL knows you can't do that. I don't care how much Bob McNair wants his guy in there. You can't do something like that. It will really damage the reputation of the league. That's already been damaged enough as it is.
Yeah. It's just, I don't blame you. Like, for me, putting it as a 5, it's me not giving the Texans organization and the NFL as a whole due credit, kind of like I did when it came to Davis and the Raiders. I am not going to be an optimist when it comes to this league. They have lost that from me a while ago in terms of how they've handled quarterbacks, both on the field and off the field for certain things. So I'm not going to give them that credence. I don't blame you, though. And like I said with my explanation, I have nothing against Lovie Smith. I think he's an amazing head coach. I think I'd love to play for a head coach like Lovie Smith. I think he's the perfect head coach for where this organization is right now. But I don't know if I want to give them the credit. I need to see it happen to give them the credit, to where the rumor is that Adam Silver stepped in when it came to the Brooklyn Nets thing, like you mentioned, and that he essentially told them, you're not going to hire Udoka. It's not happening, because we don't know the full story behind what happened with him in Boston either. So in a similar instance, I 100% with the logic you're going with, I agree with the logic. I just am not going to give the league credit right now. They've lost all credibility to me in terms of me giving them that deserved credit. Now, if it happens and if he does retain, I think it's well-deserved. I think he should get another year or maybe even 2 to try to stabilize the organization, because that organization, I mean, we want to talk about instability. They did get rid of Jack Easterby earlier this season, finally, but there's still a long way to go for that organization. And Lovie Smith could just be the guy that is the right person there, kind of like Ron Rivera was for Washington 2 years ago. I think that should be the case. So if he ends up having a 3-year tenure there, that's amazing. And I hope it is for him, because they need it.
Look, I was on the bandwagon too that David Culley should have gotten another year, because David Culley was a guy who was a coordinator in every place that he went to, and he deserved a head coaching job. It just so happened that he got a head coaching job with a slimeball general manager named Nick Caserio. So,
Yep. We were all shocked when that firing happened last year. We were like, what on earth?
Right.
It made no sense. So
right.
I mean, hindsight 2020 actually kind of makes sense for them not to do it now as well. All right.
Yeah.
All right. You've convinced me. I'll dial mine back. I'll dial mine back to you as well. I'll dial it down to a 3. Yeah. I will give them the slightest bit of credit. This is my last stand on NFL.
I know. This is it for them. They're going to join Tennessee on that other list.
Oh boy, that's all.
Tennessee, Russell Wilson, Trent Baalke, the Texans. Well, that's the list.
The fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers are not in the top 3 anymore, it says a lot.
Well, I mean, but again, like, Mike Tomlin's not a bad guy.
No, nothing against Mike Tomlin.
He's a great guy. And you want to talk about consistency. The Steelers have had, 4 coaches in the last 60 years?
Very true.
Like, they're not a team that's going to go be a revolving door. So
let me clarify. The Steelers are not there that were not on my list because of Mike Tomlin. They were there for other reasons.
Well, yeah, okay, then that's reasonable.
I have nothing against Mike Tomlin.
No.
I've had arguments about Mike Tomlin before, but I've
come join our show, Mike Tomlin, please. After you're gone, come join our show.
That would actually be really freaking awesome.
I would love that.
Mike Tomlin, I think low key, I think he's a very underrated guy who would actually do well on podcasts and stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
I think Mike Tomlin will be a hit.
Absolutely. We stay claim to him first, though. Right here, you heard it here first. Lord Elon, make it happen.
So moving on from that, let's go to the next head coach on our list. Second to last one here, Todd Bowles is who we're going to mention. It's been very interesting, to say the very least, with Todd Bowles and how the tenure in Tampa has gone. It started out well. That win against the Cowboys showed that, okay, maybe, we made a lot of jokes, but maybe those old man Tampa Bay Buccaneers, You don't let these young kids and their new age offenses to get off their lawns. Maybe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were going to have a little bit of something. And then it just, there's a little bit of regression there. Now, part of it is because there have definitely been some injuries on this team. The defense has suffered some injuries. The offense has not been 100% healthy. There have been some things going on with the Buccaneers. And of course, you look at some of the losses they had. That ugly loss to the Packers, which hindsight now 2020, it's not looking like that good of a loss considering where the Packers are at currently. The Chiefs game is understandable. They beat the Falcons by the skin of their teeth and a referee call. They lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, very ugly. The Carolina Panthers, I'm still trying to wrap my head around that 21-3 game. And the offense just looked dead to the Ravens. And it looked dead against the Rams. But Tom Brady, one time, he is able to pull all that magic together. And they defeated the Los Angeles Rams. They now have a 4-5 record on the season. And for me, I'm just going to go really quick with this. I think Todd Bowles, I think this might be the lowest one I give. I'm actually going to give Todd Bowles, as of now, a 2. Because I think even though he's been there for a couple years now, and he was the DC there, I think there are plenty of circumstances to understand what's happening. I think the offense, in terms of the revolving door of consistency there, where some guys are feeling good one week and they're not feeling so good the next, I think that's part of it. I like Todd Bowles. I think he's understood himself because this is his second go around. I think he's trying to let the offensive coaching staff do their thing. And I think it takes time to figure it out. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers said themselves, even the year they won the Super Bowl, their quarterbacks coach, Christensen, he said it himself that they didn't even think they were at their best going into the playoffs, and they just caught fire there. Like, I think it takes time, and especially with the situation that Tampa Bay is in with the heavy offensive line losses that they've had to deal with going into the season, I give them a little bit of leeway. And the same thing, Todd Bowles, I think that Tampa Bay defense has still been strong. I think they've still relatively done their job. I don't think we had this discussion actually last week on the show. I don't think that the defense, I don't think the season's on them. I think they have done a pretty good job for the most part in terms of some of these games. I just think the offense not being consistent enough is what has caused them to maybe give up an extra touchdown here or there because that they've been forced to be out there for longer and they don't have the same talent that they did have even last year compared to 2 years ago. So I'm going to give it a 2 because I think there are heavy circumstances going in on there right now, but they're still in the lead in the division. They can still go off on a little bit of a run. I think they still face each divisional team one more time, if I'm not mistaken. So that's case to build up your lead even further. And I think a lot of the tough games that they've had are just about done for the most part. You look at the rest of the schedule here. Now, this next one is going to be tough because it's in Germany and, they're facing the future Seattle Seahawks Ring of Honor member, Geno Smith himself. And that one's a tough one. But you have the Cleveland Browns who have been up and down this season. You face the Saints after that. You face the San Francisco 49ers. Again, they've also kind of been a little bit up and down. The Bengals are the first game where I think it's going to be close to a definitive loss because Jamar Chase might be back for that game as well.
Yeah.
Bear that in mind. And then you have the Cardinals, Panthers, and the Falcons to finish the season. I'm relatively confident for Tampa Bay, so I'm only going to give Todd Bowles a 2. I think it's way too early, and I think too many circumstances have gone against him. The fact they're still in lead for the division, I got to give them credit for that at least.
The reason why I had Todd Bowles on my list was because they haven't been performing to the expectations that I think we've all anticipated for them. Granted, no team in the NFC South has been performing to those expectations that they've been. I think why Todd Bowles, I also go with a 2. Why Todd Bowles is that low is because he's got the Bruce Arians stamp of approval. And I feel like that in itself means something significant because, again, Bruce Arians stepped away to give Todd Bowles another opportunity. The only thing that I would say for Todd Bowles is that where we talked about consistency, I feel like with him, his tenure with the Jets was more about stagnancy than anything else because they caught fire in his first year. They were 10-6. They had Ryan Fitzpatrick on a show-me contract. They then gave him his money, but it didn't improve the team around him. I remember that draft the next year when they brought in Christian Hackenberg, who 2 years prior was the number 1 overall prospect, and he was the 81st overall pick, and he never played it down in the NFL. And their first round pick was Darren Lee, which really gave me credence to start the why does Ohio State terrible at football. Obviously, Garrett Wilson is kind of changing my perspective on that. But Todd Bowles didn't improve the Jets. The Jets didn't improve under him. And so I feel like that the case is, yes, there's a lot of injuries going on here, and there's a lot of different things that are happening their way. They can still win their division. And, they won't be a number 1 seed. They won't be a number 3 seed. They'll probably be the number 4 seed. But Tom Brady in playoffs, and he might get some guys back. I know they lost Shaq Barrett and KJ Britt and Logan Ryan, all the injuries. they still have a good enough run. And yeah, I mean, it's not a team that we expected this from, but it's not a team that you're like shocked by per se, because you knew going in how old some of these guys were. And you knew that bodies break down after a certain point. And Tom Brady being here at 45 years old is still a modern marvel of miracle science, even though his marriage wasn't that, but his football playing days are. Yeah, I mean, I give it a 2. I still think they can win this division because I think what's going to help them out is that they've got New Orleans and Carolina in their own building, and that accounts for something with Tom Brady. I think it's a lot easier for him to kind of make that case. Yeah, I mean, he's on this list because they haven't been performing well, but he's not at the top tier because I think he's the safest one on this list that we have.
Agreed. And I also think he's the one going into the situation. Like, we compare the other coaches. The Broncos made significant additions in the offseason. The Raiders made significant additions in the offseason. The the Texans were them. Wow. And the Green Bay Packers, at least they still had Aaron Rodgers. The thing with Tampa Bay was that they lost pieces to the offensive line this past offseason. They lost pieces of that defense. Like, they how many of their starters from that Super Bowl are still there defensively? It's Levante David. It's David. It's Devin White. It is who's the corner who just got paid this offseason for them?
Carlton Davis.
Yeah, Carlton Davis.
Yeah,
and I'm scratching my head to think. And Vita Vea.
Yeah,
I think everyone else is gone. So from a Super Bowl winning team 2 years ago to now, you've lost, I think, 7 of those 11 starters. Again, I'm assuming. I can't think of who else was a starter there.
Yeah,
that's not something you can easily bounce back from.
Right.
And I think how much they lost this offseason, I think they need time to go back around. So I think Todd Bowles is safe. And like you said, I think it matters that Bruce Arians is still in the organization. He's still he's the one that handpicked him. I think Todd Bowles is going to get a good little bit of leeway. And also on the bright side, he's likely getting Tom Brady next year still. So it's looking good.
But is that a bright side though?
To be determined. Yeah. To be determined. All right, last coach on the list for our hot seat meter. Rick, this is an interesting one. Cliff Kingsbury. You want to talk about? You were mentioning offensive wunderkinds, Rick, and this guy came in as one. It's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out in Arizona because these second half of the seasons are notorious for Cliff Kingsbury throughout his entire coaching career.
Yep.
So we'll see how that works out. Rick, I'm going to throw this first one to you. Obviously, a fall from grace from last year. They were in a position last season to win the NFC West. They did not. They fell to the wild card. They got smoked in the wild card game by the Los Angeles Rams. That was a bad one. And there have been very, very brief moments. Most of them come in the second half of games, which is kind of weird, considering how second halves and Cliff Kingsbury normally don't work. But I guess in games, it's a different story. The Cardinals have been wildly inconsistent and predominantly bad for the most part. And they're a Vegas Raiders blown lead away from this being a completely lost season for them. There's still a glimmer of hope. Your thoughts on Cliff Kingsbury and where he is in the meter for you?
15. Okay, I said he would get fired during our NFC West preview show, and they have done nothing to impress me. Now, I understand DeAndre Hopkins was out for 6 weeks, and I understand that they traded away. Was it Hollywood Brown they traded away, or was it?
Well, no, they traded for him.
They traded for Hollywood Brown, and he hasn't exactly done a whole lot. He's on IR now, I think, right? So
yeah, they cut. And if you're thinking of receivers,
they cut Andy Isabella, which I didn't think he would survive on the Andy Isabella versus Rondale Moore battle. I thought he would win. They're just not good, and they were 10-2 last year with basically the same crew, and they're just not good this year. And it's just rough because they're another team that they've got a very talented quarterback in Kyler Murray. They've got a very talented defensive core. I love the way Zaven Collins from Tulsa, that linebacker, plays. I think he's really, really good. But Cliff Kingsbury is this all-or-nothing type guy, and it's just not working for Arizona. It really isn't. And, I mean, I'll telegraph it. I think they should hire Byron Leftwich next year, the offensive coordinator from the Bucs. I think he should be the guy that can help Kyler Murray out because it's not Cliff Kingsbury. It's not. He, as we mentioned, is notorious for these second-half coastings. They were 8-8 in his first season because they just blew it. They were 10-2, and then they finished 11-6. So what does that tell you? 1-4 in your last 5 games. And this year, yeah, you can say, well, they've been out, they've been hurt. They were blown out by the Chiefs. That's fine. They also lost twice to the Seahawks. Okay? They were in a close game with the Eagles. They were in a close game with the Vikings and the Rams, so you can say fine, but those close games eventually run out of charity, and I think it's running out. They still have to play the Rams again. They've got the 49ers twice, once in San Francisco, so you lost a home game to Estadio Azteca, and then you've got, maybe some cupcakes. You've got the Chargers, you got the Patriots, the Broncos, and the Falcons remaining. Maybe you can get the 7 wins, but is that the goal? Is 7 wins the goal now because you're 3-6? Like, I'm sorry. Cliff Kingsbury, I have to go over the 5 because it's a 1 to 5 scale, but just know, Cliff, your seat is not even a seat anymore. It's just a pit of lava.
Very fair, very fair. I'm going to give it a 4. I am on the same wavelength as you. I don't have it in front of me, which disappoints me. I can't find it, but he is notorious for these second half collapses, not just in the NFL. It goes back to his college days as well. The dude, he can't finish a season. He literally cannot finish a season. And we have a relative sample size. I have a hypothesis, Rick. And Cliff Kingsbury cannot finish a second half of a football season as a head coach strong. And I have a decade of proof, record-wise, as to why he can't do that. I think we can upgrade the hypothesis to a proper theory. And this is the scientific definition of a theory, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, because apparently some people don't understand what the hell a theory is that it's not a potential idea. It is a definitive fact. It is a definitive fact, proven over a decade, that Cliff Kingsbury cannot coach in the second half of a football season to save his life. And it might not save his career in the NFL that much longer as well, ladies and gentlemen. Now, granted, will Cliff Kingsbury do fine when he goes back to the collegiate ranks? I'm sure someone's going to hire him. With the name, with the cachet, with that, he's going to be hired. I mean, no, we wouldn't. But some college team is going to hire him, probably in the Big 12 or the Pac-12, is going to hire him, and he's going to become the head coach, and they're going to be a great offensive team, and they're going to be a 6-7 win team that might make a bowl game. That's about it.
Congratulations.
That is going to happen. And when Cliff Kingsbury signs his 6-year deal as a collegiate head coach and he gets fired 3 years in and he gets that ludicrous payout that all college coaches get, he's going to be coasting. He's going to be living the Vita Loca. So at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen. He's at a 4 for me because I think, like you mentioned it, there's still a chance. I think they could potentially scrounge together a 8-win season. I think there is the ability to do that. And I think if they go 8-9, I think he will be given the leeway. But I think anything less than, it would definitely be upgraded to a 5. And with the way the Rams are, if they don't beat the Rams, I'm more than willing to upgrade to 5 because Matthew Stafford could be out. If the Rams beat you without Stafford, it's not looking good, Chief. It's really not looking good for you. And like we talked about, earlier stretches, you brought up the schedule already, Rick. I think Cliff Kingsbury, it's put up or shut up. But I'm with you. I think Kyler, unlike a couple other situations, I think this is a definitive. Like Kyler Murray has shown us what he can be. I think Kyler Murray has shown us that with the right head coach, what he could be really good. And I think for a while, people thought that he did have the right head coach. No, the head coach had the right quarterback to make him look a lot better than what he has been.
Yep.
And when Kyler Murray does get his new head coach, then maybe he will be able to take that next step. But with this guy, no.
I want to buoy your point a little bit. So give me. So Cliff Kingsbury was head coach at Texas Tech. His first year was 2013.
Yep.
In his first year, the Red Raiders won their first 7 games. They were 7-0 going into a battle at Oklahoma on October 26th. That loss started a 5-game losing streak that included losses to Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Baylor, and Texas. Now, they did go on to win the Holiday Bowl against Arizona State, so they saved face. They were 8-5 that year. In his last season with Texas Tech, he started off the year with a 5-2 record, including a upset win over Oklahoma State. So keep in mind, they were 5-2. So you're thinking bowl, 1 win to a bowl game, right? Lost the next 5 games. 5-7, no bowl. Sorry for you. So you're right. We talked about the Cardinals 2020 and 2021 collapses. He's got a history of them from college as well. And when he doesn't start off well, there's no coming back from it. So I do not see this doing anything for him at all.
By the way, Rick, I found the graphic now.
Did you?
I found the stats.
Did you?
So it goes even better. Look, you mentioned 2013, 2018. So this is
Yep.
let's take a timeline real quick. 2021 with the Cardinals, lost 5 of their last 6.
Mhm.
2020 with the Cardinals, lost 5 of their last 7. 2019, the first season there, rookie season with Kyler Murray, lost 7 of their last 9. It was not good. 2018, like you mentioned, they lost their last 5 games of the season. 2017 and 2016, they lost 6 of the last 8. 2015 and 2014, they lost 4 of the last 6. And 2013, like you said, they lost 5 of their last 6. This is 9 seasons. And assuming it could be something similar this year, it'll literally be a decade of Cliff Kingsbury doing utterly nothing in the second half of a season as a head coach. I'm being generous with the 4. And we kind of said with the Raiders that we're very easily going to upgrade it with McDaniel. It's going to become a 5 for me if they can't beat the Rams, especially if Stafford is out and they lose to the Rams.
Oh, yeah.
I'd fire him on the spot. And
Absolutely.
And this is the last point I think to make, because I think some people might point out, but didn't he get extended in the offseason? You know who else had a contract extension to like 2025 or 2026?
Frank Reich.
Frank Reich. Contract extensions don't matter for a lot of these guys, and I don't think it'll matter in Arizona either. So, and also the general manager as well, Steve Klein. I think he's on the hot seat as well. Like
I said, both of them would be fired after this season.
Yeah, I think it's very fair. I think it's very fair. Kyler Murray, between the quarterback, the GM, and the head coach, if I'm picking only one of those 3 in that specific situation,
I'm taking the quarterback.
The quarterback.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that completes the head coach hot seat meter. Some spicy ones there. I think for the most part, we were kind of obvious, but some interesting rankings based off of external factors. And that's how it works in the NFL and sports in general. Sometimes external factors can change situations. And we also listed a couple head coaches that could they be on the seat later this season. We will definitely revisit this conversation once the regular season is over, because it bars revisiting come the regular season. That is for certain. Now, Rick, we know the main reason everyone is here. Sadly, Sandoval's not here to help us out with it, but it is our Sports Agents of Chaos Pick Challenge. Now, we did a little bit different. Now, sadly, we weren't able to do it the way that I kind of wanted to do it, which is where we test it to the hands of the gods and we see what Justin submits in video and we try to guess around it, which me and him did perfectly for you, by the way. I mean, we did it once. I thought we could do it again. Why not? But apparently, we gave Justin a little bit too much leeway. So, ladies and gentlemen, the way it's going to work is that it's just going to be me and Rick picking, because it works perfectly because he's number 1 and I'm number 2. And Justin usually picks last, so he has all 4 of his picks to us. And let's see what this guy decided to do with his picks.
It's a heel turn is what it is.
Heel Justin.
Right. It is Wednesday, and I know we don't have Thursday night picks, but I am tempted to take that Falcons game. It's interesting. I was given the green light by Jurg and the Podfather himself. They
Don't you dare bring me up. I didn't give a green light. Just saying.
said, Justin,
This is all me.
take any 4 games you want, throw the order out the window. It doesn't matter that you're in first place. And then they said, I'm sure he's just going to take the easiest 4 games possible. And because the integrity is not there, he's just going to try and sap him up and take that big game lead and watch as he fails because he didn't do what's right. And I'm going to tell you, I'm absolutely going to take the 4 easiest games possible. There was no doubt. If you're going to give me the chance to take an 11-point lead on you guys, that's your fault. You got to put yourself in a position to win. And that is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to take the best 4 games possible. So for my 4-point game, and I'm going to win. Has nothing to do with
Ungrateful Dead is more like it.
So the first game I'm going to take, only because Rick told me that he was not going to take it for his 4-point game to try and get a tie, is going to be the Eagles hosting the Commanders. I am more shaky about this game than you would think, because I do believe the Commanders have played decent football. Their defense has really stepped up. They are getting Chase Young back at some point. Don't know if it's going to be Monday night against the Eagles, but it is in Philly. Philly is coming off a long week. It screams trap game to me, but I'm going to believe in Coach Sirianni. He's going to have these guys ready. Jalen Hurts is going to play a good game. A.J. Brown seems to be unstoppable at this point. And the Eagles defense is playing well. So pencil me in for 4 points at the Eagles. Commanders at the Eagles. For my 3-point game, I'm gonna have to go to my interdivision rival and take the Miami Dolphins. Again, this is a good game. Miami's only favored by 3.5, which is surprising, especially being at home. The Browns, they've played well for what they've had to go through this season. The offense is a lot better than a lot of people would give credit for. Jacoby Brissett's played really well in the absence of Deshaun Watson, and I do think that they're going to put up some points against a Miami defense that's been struggling, but that Miami offense is too hot. I know they don't have the best running game. I did love the trade for Jeff Wilson Jr. He played very well in their first game against the Bears. I expect him to do well again this week, and pencil me in for the Dolphins as my 3-point winner. My 2-point game at this point will have to be an upset. And let me tell you, there's no team that I think is better coached, or they're certainly not better coached. Mike Tomlin is one of the best coaches in NFL history, and he's shown you because he's got that team every year to a 500 record. I don't know if they do it this year, but I do think that they are playing a team in the Saints that is going to have a lot of trouble scoring, especially if TJ Watt is back this week. They are currently a 1.5-point underdog at home coming out of their own bye. I'm gonna ride with Tomlin on that one. I think the Steelers win against the Saints at 1 p.m. in Pittsburgh. And my 1-point game. This is where it gets tricky because I do know that Stafford was just announced that he was in concussion protocol. So you'd like to think that the Cardinals are a decent shout here, but I just don't trust that team as a whole. They've made a lot of mistakes, and they're losing games on mistakes lately. Fumbles, bad plays, things like that. The Titans also seem like a good shout. Derrick Henry's running the ball like crazy, but that Broncos defense is really strong. I am going to go... I'm going to go with the Bears. I got to say, the last few weeks, Justin Fields has really turned things around on me. He might have heard my preseason prediction and got a little upset with me, and he's really balling out lately. So, if I don't think that the Lions are going to be able to stop him. I mean, the way he's running, the way he's passing, Chase Claypool proved to be a great addition because he could spread the field even if he's not catching 100 balls a game. I think it was a good trade. So for 1 point, hell, let's ride with Justin Fields and the Bears. Just want to put on a note, he is currently leading his team in rushing yards, by the way. He's got 602 rushes on 91 carries and 4 touchdowns. So, yeah, pencil me in for Justin Fields, the number 2 fantasy quarterback in the last 5 weeks. He's played excellent. Da Bears.
Dow Bears, what a way to end it. So Justin clearly taking advantage of us. We hope that the Lord of goodwill, the Lord of light, and the Lord of fair play all go in our favor, and that the football gods give us the points this week and not him. Wayman. Now, 2 things. A, you're muted, and B, what are you showing?
So this is a group chat I'm sending out to Jacoby Brissett, Jared Goff, Taylor Heineke, and Andy Dalton. And it says, win on Sunday, guys, okay? So, let's go.
All right.
Let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, the pick challenge, which clearly, I mean, this week it's a little bit different because we're not all here. But the way it normally works is that we make picks in a snake format, and we go from our 4-point pick, which is the game we're most confident in, to our 1-point pick, which is the game we are the least confident in. You must have at least one upset pick. It must be at minimum your 2-pointer, and you can pick a tie, but it has to be with your 4-point pick. But on the plus side, that 4-point pick becomes a 5-point pick for the tie. So there it is. Rick, give us the current standings and then make your first pick.
Well, Justin, that heelish, whatever he is leading with 55 points. You're only 1 point behind you. You're at 54. And after my stellar week last week, I am now tied with that damn deer at 31 points.
Go.
So we're rolling here. Now, that means that I get the first choice. And I'm tempted to do something here that might be a bit surprising, but I'm also seeing a game that could be an obvious 4 points for me, and I'm trying to think, do I go for the content or do I go for the points to try and kind of get more accurate because I don't really know what you're going to do at 4 and 3, to be honest. So I'm not really 100% certain.
I don't know what I'm going to do at 4 and 3 until you make your pick. To be fair, so
Okay,
you're dictating what I'm doing.
Well, I'm tempted. I'm really tempted. So just to give you a little background as to how I write out my picks. If I have used a purple pen, I go upset. If I use green pen, I go favorite. So I'm tempted here. Which one do I go with?
Oh,
remember the NFC West preview show? Remember my one bold prediction for the Seattle Seahawks?
right. Oh, Lord.
That they were going to win one game, and it was going to be in Munich against Tom Brady and Tampa Bay.
Well, first off, they completely proved you wrong.
Well, true, granted. But let's ride with that prediction for 4 points. Give me your Ring of Honor Hall of Fame candidacy, Geno Smith, taking the Seahawks into Munich, into a place where their Mount Rushmore of sports and entertainment figures includes David Hasselhoff, for some reason, Franz Beckenbauer, and will now include Geno Smith. Seahawks over the Buccaneers in Munich.
Wow. What a pick. Not going to lie, I probably would have considered that for my 3-pointer if you had not gone with that, considering I technically have back-to-back picks now.
You do,
thanks
yes.
to Justin.
Yeah.
Okay, so give me the Kansas City Chiefs for my 4-point pick. I know Jacksonville's defense has come out here and there, but I'm fully confident this Kansas City Chiefs team knows what they're doing. Give me KC for that one. For my 3-point pick, it's a little bit tough because there are a couple upsets that I think could happen this week, but it's all about the level of confidence I have. And there's one upset that I'm sure people are wondering, why do you think that could be an upset, Jurgen? And I got to tell you, it's because until I see that man down, he still scares me. I wish definitively we knew what this case with Matthew Stafford was.
Yeah.
Because I want to go with the Cardinals for my upset pick.
Yeah.
Because I think actually that Rams defense has not been the best this season.
No.
It really hasn't. And the offense as well. So it's so difficult. I really want to go with that game, man. Like, I really want to go with that game. It's tough. Justin took some good ones, which is part of the reason why I'm annoyed. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but there is a pick I'm tempted to make in the 1 o'clock hour.
Oh, no.
That I'm sure Rick would be very surprised by.
Oh, no.
Do I go with my ultimate hatred right now?
I would avoid this game completely because I know where you're going. I would avoid that game completely.
I know, like I'm just
because nobody wins that game, Jer. You know that.
I mean, I lose the game no matter who wins that one, and you know what game I'm talking about.
I do.
So that's why I don't want to go with it. So I guess, okay, this team has no choice to win this game. If they lose this game, they suck. Give me, with my 3-point pick, the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm going AFC West heavy this week, clearly. I've done that before.
Okay.
But I'm going AFC West heavy.
Okay.
And I am going to assume that with a still banged-up team, I'm assuming it's Sam Ellinger starting, there's no way, bro. Come on. If they lose this game, if they lose this freaking game, man, it's rough. And I think Jonathan Taylor's still out. But even if he is back, like, I think he's still injured to the point where. So, give me the Raiders for my 3-pointer. Rick, off to you for your 3 and 2.
You know, I'm kind of stunned with you, though. And I'm talking with Justin about this as well, because, I mean, there's a game here that's happening this week that is. I'm surprised you guys haven't touched this game or not yet. I mean, now it's up for me here. I'm going to relish this with both my hands. How about them Cowboys?
Yep.
Give me the Cowboys over the Packers at my 3-point pick because I don't trust Aaron Rodgers and Matt LaFleur. And I think that Dallas, this is Mike McCarthy's revenge game. So he's going to come in there guns a-blazing. I don't know for the Cowboys.
The only thing that scares me about that game is because no matter what the Packers situation has been as a team, they've somehow defeated the Cowboys like for however many years now.
Yeah, but watch this be the death knell.
Which could be
because again, as Dallas's offense hasn't been stellar, but that Dallas defense has been frightening.
Yeah,
and Aaron Rodgers has nobody to throw the ball to, basically. So, it's going to be one of the. I think we're going to see a halftime blow up between Rodgers and Matt LaFleur potentially. We're going to have a nice little side fight going on there. At 2 points, so I'm going to do something that I promised never to do. I'm going to go back on a pick that I made in the preseason. And there's a reason for it. At the time, I had the inverse of what I'm going to pick because I thought that the two teams that are playing were on similar trajectories, and I had a little more faith in one team's quarterback than the other team's quarterback. But ironically, now it's the inverse flip. I have faith in the guy I didn't have faith in preseason. I'm taking the Giants at 2 over the Houston Texans.
Dang it.
Yes, I am. Initially, I had Houston going into the season. However, I'm looking at Houston. I'm looking at the Giants. The Giants coming off a bye. I think they're a little bit more well-rested. And they're still a decent team. And let this be the game that makes it 7-2. So I will take the Giants my 2-point pick.
Fair. I was actually going to pick the Texans with my upset. Not gonna lie. Because the Giants, I know they look to be, point-wise, they're not, by the way, just clarification for the people, we're using the ESPN lines brought to you by our friends at Caesar Sportsbook for this one. That's what we're basing our upset picks for. I was going to pick the Texans because I know the Giants are 6-2 and all that. I feel like this is a kind of game, this is a trap game for the Giants.
It would be if they weren't coming off a 10-day bye. That's the thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Rest versus rust, Rick.
But I'm also now putting you into that uncomfortable position where you're going to have to pick the Cardinals over the Rams.
Yeah, because you know damn well I'm not picking the other team.
So let me see. The other upsets that are on the board are Minnesota over Buffalo, which could be a fun one.
Josh Allen's hurt. We haven't talked about that, but Josh Allen's hurt, and the question is,
But that's my thing. How is this? If Josh Allen is hurt, how is this still technically Buffalo being favored by 3? I get it that they're at home and no one really trusts Kirk Cousins, but how is this still an upset?
I think
it's like the Cardinals Rams. How is that still an upset if we don't know anything about Stafford?
Very true. Very true. I think part of the reason why it's still an upset is because I think people still have questions about the Minnesota Vikings defense, and I think they're thinking one of two things: either A, that the offense of Minnesota of Buffalo is still going to do their thing because Stephon Diggs' revenge game. And number 2, I think they would probably, even if Josh Allen is playing, which he shouldn't be, but even if Josh Allen is playing, that there's still the mindset that the running game, that he can be the impact runner and that he can get that running game going between him, Hines, and Singletary, if I had to guess.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, So I've said it before. I do another podcast where I make weekly picks. I'm going to make sure that I'm not contradicting myself because if I'm not contradicting myself, I think I know what I want to pick here. And I do know what I want to pick. I would not be contradicting myself. So with my upset, I'll actually go with the Minnesota Vikings because I think
very fair.
I know I guess they're still going with him. I think they should be sitting Josh Allen. Why would you risk the future of your franchise in a regular season game like this where the AFC is still yours for the taking this season? I don't see any reason for it. Give me the Minnesota Vikings, who are running away with the NFC North at this point. So give me Minnesota there. And you know what? I could still go with an upset pick for number 1.
You can.
It's very plausible. Although I'm going to go with a team that has given me a little bit of good fortune this season. I think they give me better fortune when I pick them in the lower picks for some weird reason, not with my higher picks. The Chargers, I still have faith in them. I still think they're a wild card team, but Jesus Christ, they do not look inspiring in any way.
No, they don't.
A coach that could be added at the very end of the regular season if they miss the playoffs is Brandon Staley. I'm just saying. I think Brandon Staley, some of the bloom is starting to come off of that rose. So give me with my 1-point pick, actually, the San Francisco 49ers.
Okay.
So I'm going heavy West Coast on all my selections there with a little bit of Minnesota North sprinkled in there.
With a little flair there at the end. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that leaves me. Now, preseason, I picked Denver to beat Tennessee. And preseason, I picked Arizona to beat the Rams. However, I just basically led both of Denver and Arizona's head coaches to slaughter like the lambs that they are. So it's a 1-point game, and I don't really think it's going to be that much of a factor here, but I'm going to take Denver over Tennessee. And the reason why I'm going to take Denver over Tennessee is because I feel as though I know the Broncos traded Bradley Chubb. but I feel like Tennessee's offense is still one-dimensional. It's a great dimension. Don't get me wrong, it's Derrick Henry. But I think there's enough playmakers on that defensive side to kind of keep Tennessee in check. We don't know for sure who's their starting quarterback, right? Tannehill or Malik Willis?
Yeah, I think we still need out there. I would guess Tannehill because I think it's been 2 or 3 weeks is enough, but we still don't know.
Well, I'll tell you this. It seals it for me even more. I mean, he's listed as questionable, Tannehill. But if Tannehill plays and you're not starting Malik Willis from my current doctoral school, Liberty University, you deserve to lose automatically, which you're going to. So I will take the Denver Broncos, gritting my teeth, bearing it, but I get one, and my one was the Giants. That's the only one that I'm going to do the whole season was that one. So I'll take Denver, and we'll roll with it and see what happens.
You're an amazing man of your word, Rick. So that leaves one game for the Deer, and that game is Cardinals-Rams. Do you have his selection? Because he's not with us this week.
I do have his selection, and he believes that the run of terribleness will continue in this game, and he actually considered taking this as a tie.
Really?
Yeah, he actually considered it. But he decided to kind of keep with the integrity of the show because he said, if Justin's not going to do it, then I'll have to. And he decided that he'll take this as upset pick. He is going to go with the Cardinals over the Rams.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, of course, anyone that's new, Sandoval, first off, if you don't know who Sandoval is, please watch back previous episodes. It's the highlight of the show usually. But the way it works is that Sandoval gets the final game remaining, and we do a point multiplier based off of how many games he got. Early in the season, it was different because he would get 3 games, and we never had to do anything for that. We've had to work a little bit. And, of course, last week was the absolutely magical week of him playing against
so great,
which I think which I think will happen at least one more time this season.
I think 2 more times, yeah. Because if we're doing a Thanksgiving episode, then there's 3 games on Thursday night, so we'll have that. And then if there's one other week after that, so yeah.
So there we go. So the wheel is set up. Of course, it goes from 1x to 10x plus 1. That's how it works in my mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, we spin the wheel. Oh wait, what's up,
I'm so grateful that we don't have to hear Justin complain about 10x plus 1 in algebra. It's so quiet, and I love it.
Let the wheel spin.
This is what you get when you're a heel on a podcast show. We gave you that power and opportunity. Thought you were going to be a better person than that, but
If Justin goes 0-4 this week, should we make it a requirement Sandoval has to be at his wedding?
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be a 9 or an 8.
It's right in the middle.
9. Okay.
Well, there it is, ladies and gentlemen. Sandoval has a 9-point game with that Cardinals one right there. So him and Rick are tied for now, but he could very much so take a lead back really quick.
Yeah, he could.
Will the damn deer do it? We'll wait and see. But that brings it into that section of it. So that's where, as the show breaks down, ladies and gentlemen, we have fun football chaos. We had a little bit of fun this week still, even without our usual games, without our game master. We did a lot of football. This is where we hit that in-between between the football and the chaos. Let's go full chaos now. the way we end the show.
Well, right. Before we do that, though, we got to recap the picks, of course, because that we're in the in-between. So nice little intermezzo between that and your chaos for the weekend. So Just's picks were at 4 points Philadelphia, 3 points Miami, 2 points Pittsburgh, and 1 point Chicago. Jurg, you go Kansas City at 4, Vegas at 3, hoping to God that Josh McDaniels can beat a first-year, first-game NFL head coach. Minnesota at 2 and San Francisco at 1. I take Seattle at 4 in Germany. Dallas at 3, the Giants at 2, and Denver at 1. Sandoval has Arizona at 1 with a 9-point multiplier. Upsets are Justin at 2 points, Jurg, you at 2 and 1, myself at 4 and 1, and Sandoval at 1. So should be interesting.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is how it goes. Now, let's bring in the chaos. Rick, I'm waiting for this. I hope Justin is able to be watching this right now. We have no idea what time his brother's wedding is, by the way, so maybe he is. So let's see what you got. Maybe Justin is watching with us live as we speak. What do we got on the Rant podium this week?
So I was tossing up between a few different things here for my number 3 pick on the Rant podium this week, because there were a lot of different things I think were problematic in a sense, for me at least. I could have gone with the Mets, because after it came out that the Edwin Diaz contract is basically Bobby Bonilla's contract all over again, and you got to pay this guy through 2042, I'm thinking to myself, why are we deferring these charges all over again? July 1st is Bobby Bonilla Day, and it's going to be July 2nd for Edwin Diaz Day now, of all things. Like, why are we doing this to ourselves? I don't know why. I was thinking about, talking to college crowds specifically, like, don't storm the court until there's officially 0 seconds on the clock. Looking at you fans in Temple, in the Palestra, who stormed the court twice against Villanova. Like, there's a famous, the band is on the field thing, but, I kind of don't really like crowd stormings. I mean, I get it. It's a big win, but like when it's done right, great. But when it's done terribly, like Texas Tech, we saw Michael Crabtree's one touchdown with 1 second to go, and there was a problem there. So like when there's zeros on the clock, do whatever you want. But when there's time on the clock, stay in your seats. But I decided to go with number 3, the devil in nerds' clothes, which is a term being given to 30-year-old wonderkind Sam Bankman-Fried, who was the CEO of crypto giant FTX, who's been in the news this week, filing for bankruptcy after losing $16 billion and also losing the naming rights to the arena for Jerg's NBA team, the Miami Heat. Now, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news here, but this is why you people don't get into cryptocurrency. You're all stooges and nerds. Anybody in the pro sports world that has this, Tom Brady and Gisele Bundchen as well, I think Shohei Ohtani does too. Why? Put your money into things that actually are tangible and real, that you can actually see and feel and work with and invest in. Crypto's open source. There's no way to kind of handle it. So Sam Bankman-Fried is all the way in Bahamas with his Mark Zuckerberg character. You know who he looks like? He's Chucky Finster all grown up, basically. That's what he is. He's literally the nerd who lost $16 billion in one click. $16 billion. We talked about Bernie Madoff a while ago and how much money he lost in the Ponzi scheme. Why isn't this the same thing? It's terrible. Why are we investing in crypto still? Like, it's nonsense. Like, I like money. I'm a guy who carries cash in my wallet. I still do that. And everyone says, why do you carry cash you want? It's all credit card now. Because you never know when the credit card companies are going to fold or implode. And then who's left with all the cash? The people that had cash in their wallets in the first place. By the way, Ridge Wallets, invest in them. Very good company there for sure. Number 2 on my Rant podium this week. The Carolina Panthers, they won Thursday night. It was a good win, right? Very good win. However, my rant is directed towards Baker Q. Mayfield. I understand that you're excited about winning this game. Why are you headbutting your teammates when you have no helmet on, dude? Like, this is, you want to talk concussion protocol, Matt Stafford. That's concussion protocol for no freaking reason, Baker. Like, you lost your job to the XFL MVP, PJ Walker, and now all you're doing is you're just hitting yourself in the head with your offensive lineman because you won a game. And by the way, what's your record now? 3-7? You really shouldn't be hitting anything in the head except, thinking about how to get your career back in Renaissance. Maybe go and, go find and see if Oklahoma needs help. They do, because Brent Venables sucks as their head coach, losing games like 49-0 to Texas of all teams. Like, be smarter. Be smarter. And now for number 1. This is going to be divisive. But I'm going to guarantee you that I'm going to take a middle-of-the-road pathway down with this one. The American political system of elections. Now, there are 3 pathways to look at this. If you're Democratic, in the Democratic Party, you say we have to count all the ballots because of mail-ins and absentees and all of that. Fine. All good and well. You're entitled to your opinion. If you're a Republican, you're going to say, stop counting all the ballots because it's ruining the election. We're losing everything. This system is rigged. Have your opinion. Here's my opinion. It's called Election Day. It's one day. Why is it taking 5 weeks to figure out who's the senator from goddamn Nevada, of all places? Why are there runoffs? Why can't we just have this settled in one day? 2 days tops. back in 2020, the presidential election went to Friday. It was Tuesday to Friday. Like, we're supposed to be the most modernized, civilized country in the world, right? We can't do elections better than Estonia or Liechtenstein, countries that I love, Wales even. Like, why is it that our process is just horrible at figuring out who won what? Like, I'm sitting there on election night thinking, okay, let's see how the results come in. And I'm seeing maybe a week later that, oh, this California district has 46% of the vote in. A week later? Less than half? Really, guys? And the best part, too, in Arizona, there's apparently problems because they, quote, ran out of paper ballots. I'm sorry. Election day is every year in November. You know that, right? It's the first Tuesday in every year in November, right? The first Tuesday in November. So you plan for this stuff, right? You have, all these ballots are ready to go, and you know what you do? And this is a foreign concept to a lot of people. You print out extras because you never know. Someone might, make a mistake and they want a new ballot, or you have like 5 more people show up, or hey, I forgot that my birthday is today and I'm not 18, I can vote. Why did we not plan for this further? And why don't we have concrete results right away? The rest of the world is laughing hysterically. I heard Kim Jong-un chuckle in North Korea after launching another nuclear bomb, apparently, because he was like, oh, the American election system is so stupid. It is, because we still don't know who won. We don't know anything because it takes forever to get all this done. We have to come up with a better system and a better way of doing this elections, because right now it is a joke. Absolute joke that we can't do this right in 1 or 2 days, that it takes 5 days, or in the case of Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, another month of campaigning to figure out who the senator is from Georgia. Like, I thought Duncan sucked, but the American election process right now is a total just waste of my time, and it's terrible as all of that, because again, we don't know who won anything, but Duncan still sucks, so we know who won that, and then who didn't go to Duncan because it sucks. And we also know who didn't win this week, Adam Rank. You picked the Bills over the Jets, you come fight me. You know where I am.
Oh, my God. 2 points real quick for what you talked about. Do you think Baker has qualified for the medical pension? He's just saying screw it and just trying to get injured at this point to retire?
How long has he been with the Panthers?
Just this season.
Well, no, but like how many months? Like when did he join the Panthers? Was it like
July or August, maybe?
Okay, so he's past the 90-day probation. So yeah, he should qualify for full medical at that point.
Fair enough.
Yeah, he did.
For countries who have better voting systems than us in elections, would you say Belgium is doing better than us right now?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, I think they put a can of maple syrup in as their prime minister or whatever, but at least again, in Parliament, you vote for the parties whose leader becomes the prime minister. That's better than voting for people because you don't like the other person, I think. I don't know. I'm just saying. This democracy, this democratic thing, I'm moving to Canada. Not you met Canada, real Canada.
Oh my goodness. What a number one right there.
Ugh.
That was funny to say the least. And the running out of ballots thing is the funniest thing about that. Ladies and gentlemen, what an episode. What an episode we had. Coaching hot seats. Who could get fired by the end of the season? Who will get fired once the season is over? We talked about that. It'll be revisited. Another pick challenge once again. Let's all pray for 0-4 week from Justin. And ladies and gentlemen, another spicy, zesty Rant podium. Because here at the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, we love to have fun. We love to talk football. And we love to cause just a little bit of chaos. Thank you all so much for joining us. We will figure out what we're going to do when it comes to Thanksgiving. We're going to figure that out internally amongst ourselves. But I'm willing to bet that we will likely have something in regards to Thanksgiving. So there's that. Thank you all so much for joining us. We greatly, greatly appreciate it. And we will see you guys next time. Take care and thank you.